Welcome back to this channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto was trained by Jiraiya and Nagato. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Always wasting no time. Let's start the story.
Huh. Oh. I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. I didn't mean to beat up your family member guy. If you're mad at me, Oof. He exclaimed as she launched herself into his arms, hugging him tightly as she cried into his chest. Naruto, I thought Y.U.D. died, she cried, holding him tightly. Naruto remembered how upset he was when he thought Jiraiya was going to hurt him the first time he met him, and held her tight just like he had. It's okay. I fooled that guy good though. As soon as I dropped that smoke bomb I Kawarami'd with a clone that was hidden in the trees and then made more to set up for that combo attack. He didn't even know what hit him. Naruto said proudly, before his head suddenly perked up in the direction of his home. He arrived. Nagato.ni isn't happy. He shuddered, picking Hinata up and hanging into Kobu. Let's go, I'll take you back home, Hinata-chan. Hinata nodded, closing her eyes as the rapid change of emotions had made her feel exhausted. She relaxed and fell asleep in the hang boy's arms as several thoughts raced through her mind. I need to get stronger, I need to protect Naruto. Naruto watched quietly as Jiraiya paced back and forth, glaring daggers at the tied-up man sitting in the middle of their training area. The man stared back blankly, conveying no emotion in his pupil. Less eyes. Jiraiya growled, stomping one of his wooden sandals in the dirt. Explain to me, again, why I shouldn't just kill you right now. For attempting to murder a child, please, explain to me this. He said angrily, fingering his kunai pouch for good measure. The man said nothing, only continued to watch the Sannin fight with himself on the punishment he would receive. He had been launched by that kid's wind jutsu several hundred feet, where a tower of said kid had been waiting to catch him. They had tied him up quickly and brought him before the Toad Sage, who was none too happy about the story the Naruto had to tell. Since then he had sat awaiting his verdict, since it seemed that the Sannin wanted to take matters into his own hands, like he did with the villagers some time ago. Gigi. Naruto said, causing the old man's head to turn towards him. I don't think you should kill him. Kubo could hardly hear what he had just heard. The demon giving up a chance to end someone's life? He must be trying to deceive him in some way. He killed whatever emotion was trying to build up. Disbelief, confusion, anything that would sway his view to the demon's side. He wouldn't have any of it. What? He just tried to kill you, Naruto, and if you hadn't thought as fast as you did, you'd probably be dead right now. The Hyuga are dangerous, I've told you that many times before, and your best chance of winning would be to have one underestimate you, which is what appears happened. Naruto nodded, and looked towards the Hyuga, who stared back with a little bit of deep-seated hatred in his eyes. Naruto looked a bit sad at this, which almost pulled the feeling of confusion to the surface again for Kubo, who squashed it down quickly. I know. But, he started, smiling brightly at Jiraiya. He was just trying to protect Hinata-chan, even if he did it for reasons that were wrong. And that means he's a good person. Kubo and Jiraiya stared the boy open-mouthed. Because I was protecting her. Why the fuck would he care about that? All he was going to do was plant his demon seed in her after he poisoned her mind anyway. That's what Hyuga Sama briefed us on when that monstrosity was spotted near her. Why would he want me to live because I came between him and his goal? This makes no sense. Naruto. Jiraiya said, rubbing his face in exasperation. Just because he did it for a noble cause doesn't make what he did So it isn't right that our shinobi kill criminals, even if it seems right to us? Naruto interrupted, an intelligent gleam in his eyes. I hold the Kyuubi inside me, just like you told me, Gigi, and even though I'm just its jailer, many people still think that I'm it. They truly believe it, which is why I've never had any friends. He trailed off, looking lonely. That's why I don't want to hurt them back. They just want to protect their precious people. Like I want to protect you, or Nagato.ni, or Hinata-chan. That guy just wanted to protect her from me, since I'm the demon to him, so I don't want him to die. Jiraiya sat down on a stone and looked at Kubo long and hard, and he stared back with a growing anxiety. Why would the demon talk with such compassion? Why would a demon care about people? Why would the Hokage and one of the Sannin care about a demon? What if the boy wasn't a demon? That struck Kubo with the force of a ton of bricks and his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He had been trying to murder a child, even if he had thought the child the Kyuubi no Kitsune, it was a child nonetheless, not even through the academy. He had attempted to destroy a child's mind with a Juken strike, to put an end to not even 7 years of life. Jiraiya watched the expressions play across the man's face with a careful eye, and immediately noticed when it started showing remorse. It was one of the first he'd seen, and his anger quickly started to evaporate. He looked over to see Naruto giving him a pleading look, and he sighed, nodding. Naruto walked over to the man who looked up at the child with a great sadness. Naruto. Naruto took out a kunai and cut the man's ropes, but he didn't move from his spot. I've always thought. Everyone said, I didn't. Naruto turned and walked away, a few tears rolling down his face. I don't want you dead, but I hate you. Please don't let them take Hinata-chan away from me, he said, before he quickly disappeared into the woods on the edge of the clearing. Kubo stared blankly after him, his mind fighting with itself on the information he had just deduced. Jiraiya stood up and walked over to the man, pulling him up by the scruff of his shirt. Now you listen here. He growled, Hinata is the only friend that boy has, and he cherishes her above even me at times. If it wasn't for him, you'd be digesting in a frog's stomach by now, I promise you that. Kubo gulped, sweat starting to bead from his forehead as he realized how close he was to taking the full force of the Sanin's wrath. You had better do everything in your power to make sure that Hiyashi doesn't interfere with their friendship, because if I find out that you let something slip by because you doubted that child again, I will make sure that every moment from then on will be filled with pain you can only imagine, he said, throwing the Hyuga into a tree. Kubo got up slowly, nodding. I understand, Jiraiya. Sama, I am truly sorry. But, he started, looking up towards the man, confusion evident in his eyes. That boy. Why? Is he not the demon? I thought for sure. Jiraiya took on a look of sympathy and frustration. I told them they shouldn't stop teaching Fuinjutsu in the academy. Look, if I were to seal a kunai into a scroll, does that make the scroll a kunai? Kubo shook his head, and a small look of enlightenment fell on him. Jiraiya nodded. You understand. Why should it be different for that boy? The Kyuubi's chakra was sealed inside him, but he's simply acting as its container. Just because it's inside him, doesn't mean he is it. Trust me. We'd all have been gone for a long time now if it was any different. 1 week later, Naruto walked home, feeling on cloud 9. He had just finished pushing Hinata on the swing at the park, and it was one of the few times she was laughing freely, which always put him in a good mood. She had such a pretty laugh, he wished she would do it more. He turned a corner and froze. There were multiple people standing there with masks on, and they definitely weren't Anbu. He stood completely still as they did the same, his mind racing with possible escape routes. Clones. Split. Substitute. Ground. Building. No, too many. More, oh man. He groaned inwardly as he felt several more presences appear behind him. This was coordinated, this was planned. Suddenly a body was tossed at him, a tortuous look on the corpse's face and no eyes. They were completely gone, but the face. Naruto went white. Kubo. I'm glad to see you recognize this traitor, the man in the front of the formation said. It seems you managed to poison his mind, for he was going to go and warn you about our little plan. Unfortunately for him, he was in the branch family, and it's very simple to activate their seals to force them to submit. It seems I put a little too much chakra into the seal though. No matter, he is replaceable. Naruto looked up, a look of fury on his face. You killed him because he wanted to help me. Why didn't you just lock him up or something? He didn't deserve to die, he screamed, before launching himself full speed towards the man. Suddenly he felt the wind knocked from his body as a fist lodged itself deep in his gut, launching him back several feet and onto the ground where he doubled in on himself, clutching his stomach and trying to breathe. Ignorant demon, if you had corrupted his mind so much that you didn't want him to die, he was obviously a loyal servant, and therefore a danger to everyone in the clan and compound. The man said, kicking Naruto in his head, causing him to wheeze in pain. You will not live to see this night, you can join your companion in the afterlife. Jiraiya pumped even more chakra into his legs, pushing himself as fast as he could possibly go. He had felt the spike in Naruto's chakra that they had practiced, if he ever got into danger, but he hadn't expected to run into several well-placed traps on the perimeter of their home. It had taken a few precious minutes of time for him to weave through them, as they appeared to have been laid by high Junin-level shinobi, before he was able to start making his way towards the spike. Where are you, Gaki? Please be okay, he thought frantically, as he flew through some hand signs and summoned a few toads. Find Naruto, he shouted, and they all scattered immediately. He hoped he wasn't too late. A few tense minutes later one of his summons shot a ball of air towards the sky, signaling that he had found him. Jiraiya immediately shunshined over to the place he saw it, and found the toad looking down. Hiruta, what's the mat? N.No. Jiraiya trailed off, as he looked at the wall of the alley they were in. This was. Gee. Get me. Med. Jiraiya choked out, a few tears spilling from his eyes. Naruto was hardly breathing. "You can't die, kid." He heard little footsteps dashing against the pavement behind him, and he turned around, whipping a kunai out to quickly end whoever came to further harm his godson, when he saw Lil Hinata staring at Naruto's body pinned to the wall. Her eyes widened and she slumped against the wall, reaching a hand towards him. "Ru-to? Hinata. Sama, you don't want to see WH." A man came wheeling around the corner, trying to grab the girl but coming face to face with a bloodthirsty Jiraiya. A quick chop to the neck put the man asleep, and he quickly grabbed Hinata, pulling her out of the alley so as to not force her to endure the sight anymore. She was so young still. He looked down and saw her eyes still wide open, but she was slumped over. She was muttering to herself over and over, tears spilling from her eyes in a river. Nothing he did could bring her out of her trance, so he made a shadow clone and handed her to it. It nodded and leapt off towards the Hyuga compound. Jiraiya looked back towards the blonde and felt his resolve strengthen. They couldn't stay here. Hinata woke up, rubbing her eyes, feeling groggy as she tried to remember what had happened last night. She shook as she remembered the nightmares she had. Naruto had been killed and she hadn't been able to protect him. She quickly jumped out of bed and started to get ready, eager to see him and shake the bad thoughts out of her head. As one of the branch members dropped her off in front of the academy, she noticed Naruto wasn't waiting to greet her. She was a little sad but figured there was a good reason, and shyly made her way to their classroom. She looked up at their seats, but he wasn't there either. Anxiety started gnawing at her stomach as she worriedly sat down alone. The first time since Naruto had come up and talked to her, she began poking her index fingers together, thinking of all the trouble Naruto had gotten into, what he could possibly be doing this time. She thought of her nightmare last night. She shook her head, biting back a few tears. That would never happen. The rest of the kids came in the door and Iruka soon followed. Still no Naruto. She quickly hopped down the stairs and went up to her sensei as he got his papers together at his desk. "Oh, yes Hinata?" Iruka said kindly, turning to face her. "Where's Naruto?" K.Kun? Hinata asked, a sad look on her face. Iruka's face quickly went blank, and she became a little bit more frightened. "I'll tell the class. Please go sit down Hinata," he said kindly, although he sounded a little more subdued. She nodded and slowly ascended the stairs, her stomach steadily feeling worse and worse. Iruka got up on the podium and looked sadly out to the class. "Students, last night, Naruto was attacked." Hinata felt the color drain from her face. It was a nightmare, a nightmare, a nightmare. "Won't be joining us in class for some time. Naruto can't be hurt. I said I would protect him. I need to protect him. Gone for the next several years." Hinata's head snapped up. What did you say, sensei?" Iruka looked at the young Hyuga with sympathy. "I said that Jiraiya Sama is taking Naruto away from the village to train him personally for the next few years." Hinata immediately bolted from her seat, ignoring the cries of protest from Iruka. She quickly wound through the halls and burst from the front door, making a beeline for the path that led to Naruto's home. She ran as fast as her little legs could carry her all the way to the front door, before she frantically knocked on it, looking behind her to see if anyone was following. The door opened to reveal an orange-haired man with many piercings, Nagato. She had met him on multiple occasions when coming to watch Naruto train, and found that the stoic man was actually quite nice. Nagato. N.Ni.san. Where? If you're here looking for Naruto, then he is already gone. Hinata's heart dropped, and she felt the tears well back up and break free from her eyes. Years. She wouldn't see him for years. And she hadn't even known him for a full one. Nagato watched with a hint of sadness as the young girl sat on the ground and started crying. She was truly close to him, and Jiraiya was opposed to breaking them apart, but Naruto's safety was of a greater priority to him, so it had to be done. Nagato reached into his cloak and took out a letter, allowing it to float gently towards the girl who looked at while sniffling. What's this? She muttered, wiping the tears from her eyes. A letter from Jiraiya. Sensei. Naruto would have written in it as well, but he had not yet regained consciousness. He said, turning around and activating several seals on the door. You would do well to leave this area now. The seals will activate on these grounds in approximately 1 hour, rendering anyone who comes here a painful greeting. We will communicate with you as best we can while gone, but you will not see Naruto until you graduate. I am sorry it has come to this, but know that all 3 of us will miss you greatly while gone. Nagato's tone became a bit friendlier at the end, conveying his sadness at having to leave. Hinata sniffed, rubbing her eyes. Why though? I'll miss him a lot. No one else wants to be my friend. Nagato stood her to her feet and looked up at the clouds floating by. What do you fight for, young heiress? Hinata sniffed again, looking confused. Huh? The pierced man looked at her with a serious expression. What drives you to become a good shinobi, to stand out among the rest? Hinata looked down. Want to make my father proud, and my clan. And she blushed. Want to protect Naruto. Nagato nodded. All noble reasons. However, you need to become much stronger if you wish to protect Naruto. His enemies will be very powerful, I can promise you that. Hinata wrapped her arms around herself, looking down. Why? I cannot tell you. But know this. I am not telling you these things for no reason. Use your sadness, your bitterness that we are gone, and use it to focus. Train yourself hard for the time we are gone, so that when we come back, you may look upon Naruto as your equal, and stand by his side once again while being able to protect him as you wish to do. Hinata nodded blankly, not entirely understanding what he meant, but getting the gist of it. She started walking back towards the path, clutching the letter close. She stayed that way all the way to a small clearing that she and Naruto would play in sometimes. She curled up on the ground and cried. Nagato had already left, so she was alone. Just like she had been before Naruto, and like she would be from now on. Alone. She looked at the letter and opened it, pulling out two things from the container. The first was a photo of her and Naruto, both of them smiling widely at the camera while holding up the turtles they had caught at the pond. She knew immediately that this photo was now the most precious thing in the world to her, and she had to protect it no matter what. The second was a letter, the one from Jiraiya based on what Nagato told her. She ignored it for now, choosing instead to stare at the photo until she would go back home later to read it before going to bed for the night. Hinata, I'm sorry that we had to leave like this, but Naruto's safety is my #1 priority right now. He needs to get stronger before he can come back, so we need to keep him safe until then. I'm getting ahead of myself though, I need to let you know something about last night. That was no dream you had. That is what the people of the village think Naruto deserves, and that is why we have to leave. Why they hate him so much, will be up for him to tell you when we come back, which will be when you graduate the academy. He already knows, but I ask that you don't push him to tell you. It's a sensitive topic, please trust me on this. I know you'll be extremely sad to hear this, but don't worry. Naruto will be back in time to get a team, and I'll try and argue with the Hokage to put the two of you on a team. I know you have a strong bond and that can prove invaluable on the battlefield, when all you have is each other. Until then, train hard so that you can prove to old man Hokage that you deserve to be on a team with him, and I promise you the years will fly by quickly. I know you're a little young to understand this, so save this letter, and reread it every once in a while so that you can grasp fully what this all means. Naruto will be safe with me, so don't worry about him. I'll try to send letter to you every once in a while, and I'm sure Naruto will want to as well. Don't worry, we'll be back before you know it. Jiraiya. 5 years later. Two figures stood at the very top of a tree, looking over the canopy to where the large, imposing gates of Konoha stood ever vigilant. To both of them, it was a welcome sight. To one, however, it was nerve-wracking, but he didn't let it show, keeping his face cool and impassive. Are you ready? Once we enter, there's no going back, the older man said menacingly, crossing his arms to look at his partner. I have no choice but to be ready. I've been gone for too long, and I feel my luck has ran out. I need to be there to protect them in case something happens. That being said, we're wasting time, our enemies could be on the move as we speak. Let's go, he said, leaping down from the tree, and his partner followed silently. Hinata sighed and looked up at the clouds, stretching out on the ground below her. She had graduated, of course, but now there was nothing to do as the rest of the students took their respective tests, so those were dismissed until 3 p.m. And it was only noon. She had been done for over an hour now and she had nothing to do. Except maybe train. She shook her head. No use in tiring herself out when she would be meeting her Junin sensei today. She wanted to appear highly presentable, to look strong and capable, so that she could become an official genin and prove that she was strong, to both herself and her father. And Naruto. She sighed again. It had been over a year since she'd last received a message from Jiraiya. They had come frequently in the years following Naruto's departure, but as the training got more intense and the areas they visited more dangerous, he said that it wasn't always possible they would be able to send out a letter. And true to his word, they had dwindled to once every few months before they had cut out completely. It had been over a year since she had last heard from the blonde, the last letter he had sent saying that he missed her. With all of his heart, every day. She had that particular letter sealed into a locked box along with the picture of the two of them shared before he had left. She blushed slightly, thinking of what he must look like now. Probably still short, still a little baby fat on him. They were only 12 after all, lean muscle. Under a waterfall. She pictured what he would look like with his shirt off. Her daydream continued as she stared at the clouds, a bit of blood dripping from her nose, not that she had noticed. A dark chuckle from in the woods instantly put her on her guard, and she flipped upward, immediately settling into the Juken stance. She activated her Byakugan without a word, searching frantically through the trees for the source of the noise, although she found none. She let go of the breath she had been holding, before noticing the blood on her cheek. She blushed pink and rubbed it away, glad that no one was around to see her evidence of thinking such perverted thoughts. She was the good girl of the Hyuga, the princess of the clan. She was strong, almost even in skill with Neji, which her father took great pride in her for. It was all thanks to Naruto. His encouragement before he left, Jiraiya's and Nagato's words to her, all repeated in her head each and every day, driving her to push herself beyond her limits and train harder than she ever would have otherwise. Where before she was about to drop behind Hanabi in terms of skill, she now never failed to put her sister on her butt, despite doing it as gently as possible so as to not harm the young girl. Where before Neji could effortlessly toy with her and show off to anyone watching on the sidelines, he now had to focus and not rush into fights with her recklessly, lest she exploit those weaknesses and win their spars. She had also, based on encouraging words Jiraiya put on the paper of her stealth skills from Stal. Watching Naruto, she had hoped the blonde hadn't seen, she had begun to work on those as well. She had discovered the skill she had developed to protect her crush from afar had other practical uses. Soon after herself training, she had managed to sneak up and catch a fat cat she found out the name of to be Tora, and gave it to the genin team who had approached her full of gratitude that they no longer had to deal with the stupid beast. She progressed from there, following various troublemakers, drunkards, and shady businesspeople as a service to Konoha, informing local Anbu or Junin of situations before they even began, which put her on the good side of many of the shinobi in the village. An academy student serving her village before she was even an official shinobi? Someone that was hardly heard of in their dog world. Selflessness was a prized quality, and one, sadly, that was exploited far too often. Hinata would see those situations though, using her Byakugan to weave through the liars and those who genuinely needed help. And she grew stronger because of it. Overall, she was progressing quickly. So quickly that it even scared her a little, and made her a little ashamed that she had no other hobbies besides training and tending to her flower garden, but that didn't take much time. It was train, read Naruto's letters, train, eat, train, sleep, train, attend clan meeting, train, train, train. She was a little relieved that she had trained as much as she did, if she wanted to be honest with herself. It helped the time pass quickly, and just like Jiraiya had said, the few years that she was forced to be apart from Naruto actually passed fairly quickly. Sure, she missed him every second of every day, and he would even show up in her dreams sometimes to wipe away the tears she wanted to shed because of the distance between them. But other than that, she was fine. And he would be back soon. Her eyes brightened up upon remembering this, and she decided to go get a treat. A nice, warm cinnamon bun from the bakery, something to celebrate her victory, and Naruto's soon-be return. After all, Jiraiya said that Naruto had to show up to take some sort of test for him to pass. Although it didn't have to necessarily be on the same day that everyone else took theirs. He was a special case, after all, and to be put into a team. They were receiving teams later today, so she wondered if he was supposed to be back today. She hoped so. She felt her stomach drop a little when she considered that he might not make the deadline, and have to wait another year. Which meant that he might not get placed on her team. Which means we'll still never see each other, even when he comes back. Hinata thought glumly, taking a bite into her cinnamon bun. As soon as the pastry met her taste buds, she practically moaned in ecstasy, looking around quickly to make sure no one noticed her. This was her one guilty pleasure. Well, besides fantasizing about a certain blonde, her hormones were raging. After all, it was only natural, she told herself, and she didn't want anyone to know. As she took a second bite and felt some of the melted icing begin to drip down her chin, she heard a slight hitching of breath from somewhere in front of her. She narrowed her eyes and whipped them back and forth, but still seeing no one. This was strange. She shook her head. She was getting paranoid. The feeling of meeting her new sensei that would determine the type of team she would be in, who she would be looking up to, and everything that involved at least the next year of her life must be affecting her. Speaking of which, she could swear she heard the instructors telling the kids their teams, but she hadn't been told anything about hers. She shrugged, popping the rest of the cinnamon bun in her mouth with one last shiver of happiness before she made her way through the shopping district, watching with idle fascination all the different people throw their money away for outrageous-looking clothes. I'll never get why anyone would pay that much just for one kimono. No matter how nice it looks. Hinata thought, watching the lady pay 40,000 yen for a silky-looking kimono. Sure, it looked beautiful, but she would rather spend her money on more practical things, like ninja tools, another jacket, some handcu. She smacked her head, feeling a slight blush rush to her cheeks. Bad Hinata. Being away from Naruto for so long and being stuck around Shino's friend Kiba had begun to put more and more perverted thoughts into her head. Stupid mutt. Can't stop talking about mating. Hinata stuttered even in her head as a blonde flashed through her head along with that magical word. This time loud boisterous laughter rang out as she felt her cheeks flush a tomato red. Several people turned their heads in the direction of the source, but no one seemed to be making the noise. It was simply gone. Hinata shivered, her thoughts instantly turning dark. This is no coincidence. Someone is following me, she thought, her eyes silently activating as she scanned for hidden chakra signatures. She huffed, obviously frustrated. None. What was going on? She quickly dashed onto the nearest rooftop, before she began hopping back to the academy. She may be a few hours early, but it was better than feeling as if the eyes of a predator were watching her every move. A pair of eyes were indeed watched the violet-haired girl dash off, amusement evident in them. The figure said nothing, but quickly dropped from his hiding spot and dashed off after her, making sure he was out of her field of vision. Getting caught was definitely not on his list of things to do today, but seeing her was. He'd watch for only a little longer, he told himself, then make himself known. Hinata sighed dejectedly as she walked through one of the more heavily wooded training areas. She had gone back to the academy, hoping that her Junin sensei had shown up, but no luck so far. She had even asked about her team, but simply told to come back later and she'd find out. Great. She idly kicked a rock. This was bullshit. She wanted to get started. She wanted to prove herself worthy of the title Konoha Shinobi, and make herself worthy of Naruto. She had realized at some point during his absence that she liked him as much more than just his best friend. Sure, she cherished that, but she felt she was entitled to a little selfishness, wanting more. She'd wait as long as she had to, of course, but hoped that he would feel the same after being away from her for so long. Wishful thinking, but she was hopeful nonetheless. A sudden breaking of a branch had her spinning in the same instant, as she watched a brown, cloaked figure rushing at her through the thick cover of trees. She raised her palm, gathering chakra to juken her attacker in the face, but the figure twisted at the last moment, dodging her extended arm, and spearing her in the stomach, knocking them both to the ground where they rolled for a good 15 feet. Hinata gasped as she tried to refill her lungs, struggling as best she could against her enemy who had her in a tight grip from behind. She had to disengage before they had a chance to stab her with a kunai, or break one of her limbs, putting her at a disadvantage. She raised her arm, about to swiftly elbow the person in the face when a choked sob reached her ears. Ta-chan. She heard, before realizing the person wasn't attacking, but simply holding her, arms wrapped around her waist from the back. I know that voice, she thought, and with trembling hands, she reached back and pulled back the hood, revealing spiky blonde hair. N. She sputtered out, still unable to see his face due to it being buried into her back. The boy said nothing, just squeezed her tighter, pressing a light kiss into her spine. She shivered. I missed you. So much. Hinata-chan. The blonde choked out, raising his head to look her in the eyes, causing her entire being to resonate with happiness. Naruto-kun. She whispered, before it was her turn to twist around to face his front, to bury her head in his chest, crying her eyes out and holding him tight as he whispered soothing things to her and stroked her hair. All the loneliness she'd been holding back, all the pain and emptiness she'd felt for the past 5 years, all came to the forefront as the boy she'd cherished for over half her life was finally back in her life, and within arm's reach. They stayed that way for a long while, Hinata getting the rest of her tears out while he stroked her hair, holding her tight to his chest, before she sniffed, leaning back to look at his face. It was just like she'd imagined, plus a few things. Much of the baby fat was gone, replaced by the lean face of a fighter, although a little bit still remained, destined to disappear only with age. His hair had grown long and unruly, looking like he hadn't had a haircut since she'd last seen him, but it still had the same soft, fleecy look, and she was dying to run her hands through it to see how it felt. His eyes though, this was something she wasn't expecting. The once kind, soft open eyes he had were the same, but only to a point. She could detect a certain hardness in them, a look that said he knew of the cruelties the world could throw at you without batting an eyelid, and expect you to deal with them just the same. Those eyes were the same, yet so different. She found herself staring, a light blush adorning her cheeks like the blonde stared back. He was having similar thoughts, studying her now that he could finally get a good look at her. Where before her cheeks were round, they now had a shapely curve to them, her entire face seeming more graceful and beautiful, he suppose. He blushed as he felt her body press against his, realizing what else time and puberty seemed to have done for the young Hyuga. He felt her growing chest push against his own, and her womanly hips slide against his form. He inhaled her scent in, feeling intoxicated. God, he missed her. And now he was back, and she was all his again. N. Naruto.kun. Hinata said, looking up at him. He tilted his head, giving indication that he was listening. Where did that scar on your chest come from? He looked down, cursing when he realized that his cloak had come open at some point, revealing his muscled chest, but also a thick scar that ranged from over his heart in a jagged line down to his hip. He frowned, a dark memory coming to mind, before he shuddered, drawing in a jagged breath as he felt her finger trace the damaged skin. It must have hurt, she muttered, frowning, not knowing the pleasing effect her touching was causing the young boy. He felt his own blush start to form, as he watched her eyes rake his body for any more injuries he may have sustained. Don't worry, Hina-chan, he said, causing her to raise an embarrassed eyebrow and blush at the new pet name. There aren't any more. Just that one. She nodded, seeming to realize the position she was in before removing her hand from his bare flesh and simply holding him again. I missed you. Naruto. K.kun. He smiled, leaning his head against hers and squeezing her again. I missed you too, Hinata-chan. Naruto was back in his regular outfit consisting of black, standard shinobi pants which he insisted had a secret, causing Hinata's mind to roam on what he could be hiding, and a black and orange jacket. She knew orange was his favorite color, so it didn't surprise her to find it somewhere on the boy's clothing. They had walked through the training ground, talking about things not of consequence. In case of unwelcome ears nearby, Hinata never did find who was following her, although she had asked Naruto and he had denied anything other than finding her and spearing her in the woods in excitement, until they had emerged onto the main street of Konoha, heading towards the academy. The change in Naruto's eyes and his stance as soon as they stepped foot into public shocked Hinata. Gone was the boy she had played with years ago, gone was the boy who had just held her close in the woods. Here was one that took no chances, trusted no one, and kept to himself. His eyes were cold, darting back and forth to look for possible threats, and upon one of the villagers recognizing him and glaring at him, he sent one right back that had the man pissing his pants. She was kind of scared. This wasn't the Naruto she knew. The warm, loving boy she had fallen for. This wasn't him. But the moment her frightened eyes met his, she saw a bit of the cold exterior melt away, turning his icy blue eyes into the deep, warm ocean blue she could stare into forever. Until his hand whipped behind him, catching a plate that had been aimed for his head. His cold gaze returned, and he slowly turned his head behind him, spotting the perpetrator. It was a civilian who was washing dishes on his front porch, and upon spotting the demon, back in their peaceful village, had decided to try to drive him off. Sadly, this wasn't the same helpless boy the village had mauled in the past. This was one different. His face grew pale as the plate in the boy's hands suddenly shattered into many pieces. How had he done that? His hand didn't even move. He howled in agony as his arm suddenly shot out blood. He looked down to notice one of the shards of plate embedded in his tricep. Naruto walked off without another word, Hinata keeping close to his side. She looked at him sadly. This wasn't how he wanted to come back, but another warm glance from her crush had her feeling a little better. I knew this would happen, he said with a slightly bitter voice. I didn't exactly want to come back, but Gigi said I had to if I wanted to become an official shinobi. And I wanted to see you, he said, looking forward. She felt her face grow warm and she smiled. Even if he showed a colder side now, he was still the hyperactive caring boy she knew. She felt her blush deepen at the action she was about to take, and trying not to think about it, she reached down and grabbed his hand, holding it tightly. She felt his eyes turn to her in surprise, and she could have sworn she saw a slight blush of his own appear, before he turned his eyes back to the main path, a smile on his face. He weaved his fingers in between hers, and she gained a smile that matched his. The verbal abuse the villagers began to dish out to the newly returned demon, reflecting off their bubble of happiness. After entering the building, Naruto gave Hinata a sad smile, stating that he had to head off to classroom A.4 to receive his assignment. This information was received by Hinata with a dazzling smile, and her excited voice stating that the classroom he was supposed to go to was the same as hers. That meant that there was a strong chance they were on the same team, seeing as how different teams were supposed to go to different classrooms to meet their respective Junin senseis. Naruto had also smiled widely at this, seeming thrilled with the idea of having the pale-eyed beauty as his teammate. They entered the room, fingers still interlocked, turning their attention to the only other figure in the room. Said figure turned his head over to them, revealing it to be Shino. Naruto's cold mask quickly reattached itself, but Hinata continued smiling brightly. Hi Shino-kun, Hinata said, letting go of Naruto's hand to go greet him, much to a certain blonde's disappointment. Are you here to receive your team assignment too? Shino nodded, glancing back and forth between the two. I am. It's good to see you again Naruto-kun, he said, looking towards the blonde. The boy didn't respond, his calculating glare still resting on the Aburame. Hinata looked back and noticed this, smacking herself in the forehead lightly. Oh, Naruto-kun. I forgot to tell you, Shino-kun here is my friend. After you left, I remembered you said that he talked to you like normal instead of like the rest. I decided to ask for help one day when it came to setting traps, and we've been friends ever since. She finished, smiling brightly. Naruto felt a bit of jealousy creep into his mind as he looked at Shino. The boy stared back impassively, his sunglasses blocking whatever emotion Naruto might have been able to discern from his eyes. Naruto remembered the time Shino had asked him how he was able to throw a kunai straight, and that simple interaction had filled him with joy. He slowly lowered his guard, his cold exterior transforming into a friendly, albeit hesitant one. Shino. It's been a while, he said, smiling crookedly. Shino nodded, letting his coat fall a little to reveal his smile. I'm glad to see you again Naruto-kun, the real you, I might add. May I ask what happened to force you to adopt a mask like that? Naruto chuckled bitterly, shaking his head, causing Hinata to frown lightly. Maybe some other time, but it's not something I like talking about. Shino nodded, before settling back into his chair. Well, either way, I'm glad you trust me enough to let me see you. I hope you've grown strong in your years away from the village, because most of the class has grown sick of Sasuke, and I'd be glad to see you kick his ass, pardon my language, he added as an afterthought. Naruto laughed, shaking his head with amusement. That Teme is still being a little prick and acting high and mighty. Didn't he learn his lesson when I handed him his own ass last time? Oh well, I'll see to it that he remembers he isn't the almighty Prince Uchiha the next time we get to fight. Naruto promised, earning him a chuckle from Shino. I'd appreciate that, he said, before turning to Hinata. So, it looks like we'll all be on the same team. I just wonder which Junin will be teaching us. Hinata shrugged, blushing slightly as Naruto crept up next to her, keeping himself in close proximity. I don't kn. No, I haven't heard anything about it yet, just that I needed to be in here by late afternoon if no one approached me. Shino looked at Naruto questioningly, and he received a similar shrug. I took my test earlier and was told the same thing. Hinata raised an eyebrow at Naruto, looking at him sideways. You never told me that you had taken your test. What was it? Naruto smiled largely. It's a secret. Let's just say that I got to see some interesting stuff. Hinata was confused at his words, but decided not to pry. He had passed, right? That was what was important. They all turned their heads as the door opened, relieved that their Junin sensei had finally decided to show up. Surprisingly, however, it was the Hokage that walked through the sliding door, regarding them all with kind expressions. Hokage. Gigi, Naruto exclaimed, leaping into the man's arms and hugging him. The Hokage laughed in happiness, hugging the young shinobi back. It's good to see you again Naruto, he said kindly, ruffling the boy's hair. Naruto pouted, before bouncing excitedly. Are you our sensei Gigi? Naruto asked, an expectant expression on his face. Sarutobi shook his head, a chuckle escaping him. Naruto shrugged, slight disappointment coming to his eyes. Oh well, I can dream, can't I? The elderly leader cleared his throat, causing Naruto to close his mouth and focus on him. No, and, on the same subject. The three of you will not have the same sensei seeing as how you're not on the same team, he said, causing Hinata's eyes to widen in surprise and disappointment. Naruto's narrowed in irritation. Then why were we told to meet in the same room? Surely not just so you could bring together three people who would enjoy being together and crush their hopes? Naruto asked sarcastically, drawing a look of disbelief from Hinata and Sarutobi. Shino merely filled away the comment for later. No Naruto, of course I wouldn't, there is most certainly a reason for this. He began. The three of you will not be on any three-man cell, on account of your skills being requested in specialty divisions within our ranks. All three of the newly appointed genin felt their jaws drop as their leader continued. Shino, due to your natural ability to both detect and quickly set up traps, as well as your skill with your Kakacha. You were being requested to train under Ibiki Morino as a forward scout and torture expert within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept? Shino nodded, using a single finger to fix his sunglasses. I would be honored to, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded, before turning to Naruto, who was now hovering just behind the young Hyuga, who was trying to keep the blood from rushing to her face when his breath tickled the back of her neck, and Hinata. Naruto, due to your prowess in combat, tactical genuineness, and exceptional stealth abilities, you are being requested to continue to train under the Toad Sage Jiraiya, doing solo missions that I see fit to send you on, or going along as support with other three-man cells. In these instances, you are not required to listen to the Junin sensei of the team in times of combat, seeing as how you have much experience under your belt at this point, but in any other instances you are to recognize their rank and take orders as they see fit. Do you accept? He finished, fixing Naruto with a critical stare. Naruto nodded. Sarutobi sighed a bit in relief. Naruto was still a bit of a wildcard, and he didn't know what he'd do if the boy didn't take the offer. Getting to go solo was the best choice for the boy, and getting the council to agree, via many threats and reminders of who they were dealing with, had been a pain in the ass. He turned to Hinata, watching her straighten up with a determined expression on her face. He smiled, seeing the will of fire burning strong in her eyes. Hinata, due to your exceptional stealth skills, tracking skills, and specialty in taijutsu, you are being requested to train under Mitarashi Anko as a specialist assassin within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept? He saw Hinata's eyes widen in happiness, before growing a little distraught, flickering over to Naruto's still form. Sarutobi chuckled lightly. Hinata-chan, you have no need to worry. Naruto will have partial control over who he wishes to support, and you will not be sent on assassination missions for quite some time. In time this will be your job, but until then, Anko is merely there to guide your training to see where you need improvement on your current skills, before expanding to infiltration and other such subjects. You will be free to train with others in your free time, and aid other teams in missions, should they request you. He added the last part with emphasis, shooting a look towards Naruto who caught on immediately, causing his face to split into a wide grin. Hinata nodded, also sporting a large smile, blushing a little when she felt Naruto squeeze her hand from behind her. I accept, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen smiled, raising his arms. Then, I hereby welcome you as official genin of Konoha. Naruto grunted, taking the chakra-powered hit to his thigh before using his good leg to push himself away, letting loose a few shadow clones as cover. As he leapt away, Hinata swiftly took pursuit, rolling in midair to dodge both of his clones' attacks while lashing out and striking them both in the head, dispelling them. She landed smoothly and rolled, using the momentum to launch herself at Naruto, Byakugan blazing. Shit, Naruto thought, before performing a quick substitution with a nearby log. He watched as the log was shattered with ease at the pale. Eyed Kunoichi's blow, before she turned on a dime and rushed him again, throwing several shuriken in order to stop the hand signs she knew he was about to start on. Naruto cursed before making a quick shadow clone, having it block the initial attack Hinata had dished out, slowing her momentum and allowing him to escape her brutal Jiyuken strikes yet again. Have I become that predictable? Naruto thought, a frown marring his features. If his frown affected Hinata at all, she didn't show it, choosing instead to unleash a barrage of kunai at him. He leapt up without thinking, immediately realizing his mistake as the girl jumped into the air with him, her face bright with triumph. Thinking quickly he formed a shadow clone, before kicking off of it, sending it towards the Hyuga and himself away from her. Suddenly, an idea dawned on him, and he grinned widely at the plan. It's so stupid, it just might work. And I suppose I need to start being completely random or else Hinata-chan is gonna beat me one of these days. He landed on the ground on one knee, his most used hand sign already up, forming a small army of shadow clones behind him. Suddenly, clones were grabbing other clones and launching them at the still airborne Hinata, trying to strike her in midair. Hinata quickly began using her superior taijutsu skills to Jiyuken the clones as they came flying, but so many were coming she began dispelling them with regular taijutsu to save chakra. An axe. Kick to the head. That one gone. An elbow to the face. Dispelled. Suddenly, she drove her fist into the stomach of another, but instead of it dispelling in a cloud of smoke, it simply smiled widely at her through the pain, before quickly flipping them so that he was holding her in a headlock. They smashed into a group of clones that had gathered below them, cushioning their drop back to earth, and Hinata saw the dust cleared to witness about 20 kunai pointing at her neck, including one from the boy who was now embracing her from behind. With a sigh of frustration she shrugged. I concede. I would be dead right now if you were the enemy. A large cloud of smoke wafted over the pair as all of Naruto's clones dispelled, leaving the grinning boy gripping the now blushing girl to him. Although she was a bit embarrassed at being so close, she still wasn't entirely happy. She reverse head butted him in the chest, causing him to let out a quiet, "OOMF. You idiot," she said, grabbing one of his hands and playing tentatively with his fingers. "If I had still been using Jayuken against your clones, I would have seriously hurt you with that blow to the stomach." That was stupid and reckless for a simple spar, Naruto-kun. She bent back one of his fingers a little far, hearing a light hiss of pain from the blonde. Hinata-chan, he said, attempting to draw his hand away but having it forcefully yanked back into her lap. "I knew that you would stop using unnecessary chakra to only dispel clones, seeing as how you need it enough to finish me off and your reserves aren't big enough to be able to do that yet." His explanation was sound, but Hinata refused to let him win, bending another finger back, causing him to yelp lightly. "Stop that." "No," she yelled back, before he noticed a certain wetness on his hand. "Was that Hinata? Look at me," he murmured, causing the violet-haired beauty to stiffen. "No," she replied with a bit less anger, clutching his hand with now trembling hands. Naruto huffed. He hadn't imagined that she would grow to be so stubborn with him away, but then again, when she had to stand strong to her cold father, to be able to stare him down in battle, he supposed that stubbornness was one of the best traits she could take on to make it easier on her. Better this than a massive ego, or a superiority complex. He quickly whipped her around, his eyes widening as he took her expression in. Her eyes were also widened a little in surprise, accentuating the tears that were dripping from their edges. His breath hitched as he tucked her into his chest, rubbing her back soothingly. "Hinata-chan," he said gently, feeling her slight sobs rocking her frame. "Why are you crying? I'm sorry I did that, but I had to find a way to win." "You don't understand," she yelled into his chest, muffling her voice. He frowned, still running his hand along her spine. "Then tell me," he said just as loud, confused by her actions. "Why did girls have to make things so cryptic?" Whenever he had a problem with Jiraiya, Gigi, which wasn't often, he told him, and then they'd fix it. There was rarely a moment where he was confused with what was going on. Everything was so crystal clear, but now. It had been several weeks since they had received their assignments, and they had all taken to their training with gusto. Shino was learning about pressure points, human psychology, and different politics within different villages as a first step in his interrogation training. After all, if the scouting team did manage to capture an enemy in hostile territory, they had to be able to break him there, in case they didn't have a chance to escort him back to friendly territory for a thorough interrogation. As soon as the boy was done being instructed, he would be glued to anatomy textbooks, books on the workings of the human mind, autobiographies from older shinobi, reports from missions or wars. Anything that could help him grasp how the minds of shinobi reacted in a given situation. Ibiki was gleeful at the thought of someone who was showing as much enthusiasm at breaking someone's mind as his first, and star, pupil, who had been busy making a certain Hyuga's life a living hell. Anko had been constantly hunting the young girl, even when their training was supposedly done for the day. This made for a stressful atmosphere around the violet-haired beauty, who not only was afraid that the crazy snake bitch, as Naruto so gracefully put it, would catch her off guard one of these times, which would promise a particularly harsh training session the following day, but that she would hurt Naruto as well in these brutal assaults. After all, if he wasn't busy training with Jiraiya, he was asking her to train with him. If that didn't go as planned, he would train on his own until Hinata was free, and then they would relax, train, go out to eat or whatever else happened to suit their fancy at the time. This meant that the boy was working himself to the bone almost 24/7, which made Hinata worry about him, whenever she wasn't busy worrying about when Anko might pop out next. The first few weeks of training with the girl had been surprising with Naruto. While he remembered her being reserved and unsure of herself in fights in their early academy days, she now fought fiercely, showing him a whole new side of her he had never witnessed before. Of course, the first few fights she hadn't come at him with the intent to kill, which he made clear to her she should do if she wanted to get some kind of experience from their battles, but after a good session of head bopping, he thought she looked rather cute when she whined about him gently knocking her on the head with the underside of his fist. And reassuring words that she most definitely would not kill him, she had agreed. Since then, Naruto had actually had to work to stay away from her deadly chakra-filled strikes, having to utilize more and more tricks in his book as she slowly learned his style of fighting. He was brought from his thoughts as the girl in his arms head butted his chest again. If I had chosen to start using Jayuken strikes again. If I had hurt you." She shook her head, more tears flowing freely from her delicate eyes. IW. Wouldn't be able to forgive myself, Naruto-kun. I wouldn't. Something in Naruto's head clicked, and he felt guilt wrap around his conscience. I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. It's just you've been putting me on the ropes lately, and I figured it was time to try something new. I suppose flinging myself at you like a kunai was just a tad reckless though. He mused, earning him a quiet giggle from his companion. Just a tad, Naruto-kun. Try a lot of tads? She looked stumped as she tried to find a way to express her feelings, and Naruto snorted, falling back in laughter. Hinata yelped as she was carried with him, landing with her hands on either side of her head and straddling his left leg. Naruto continued to laugh, unaware of the scarlet blush that was slowly creeping up Hinata's face as she realized the position she was in. If anyone were to see her. Think fast, stalker girl. Hinata groaned, before grabbing Naruto and leaping away from the 30-foot snake that crashed into the ground. They were just hissing in frustration that he missed his target. Naruto grew somber fast, narrowing her eyes at their opponent before he facepalmed. What do you want, you insane snake bitch? He yelled, stepping in front of Hinata protectively. Hinata rolled her eyes but blushed all the same at his behavior, stepping around him and ignoring his look of disappointment. Surprise attacks are part of training, shorty. Anko yelled back, smiling with glee. She had seen the position that the two runts had been in, and was quick to let her pupil know. If you wanted the day off to relax, you shoulda let me know. I would chipped in for the love hotel. She yelled, almost doubling over in laughter at the look of pure embarrassment on the girl's face as it quickly returned to its previous shade of red. Naruto scratched his head in confusion before shrugging. Can she have the rest of the day off? We just got done having a particularly nasty spar, and will the enemy let her rest after they pursue her if she's caught killing her target? Anko interrupted, her tone suddenly very serious. I knew you two were duking it out, that's why I decided to attack when the two of you were most vulnerable. You must never let your guard down, especially with the position the two of you have been given. You wouldn't have sensed me if I didn't announce my presence, Hinata, and although your reaction time was splendid when you did know I was there, you would have been dead otherwise. You need to remember that the only time you're considered on safe grounds during my training is when you're sleeping in your bed or in your compound training with your clan, otherwise you're a target. Hinata looked down, a frown looking out of place on her normally happy face. She was frustrated at herself for letting her guard down so easily. Even if she was with Naruto, she had no excuses, especially if she wanted to go on missions with him one day. They both had to be at peak performance if they both wanted to survive. Naruto opened his mouth to defend his friend when Anko interrupted him. And you, Blondie, while I respect your strength, you have nowhere near the amount of experience that I do in the field, and as such you have no right to think that the girl deserves any respite from this training. I chose her personally because I saw her will to work hard and achieve what other people would quit on. I could see that she wouldn't have let you fight her fight anyway, or let you talk me out of it, but I need you to understand so you aren't walking around with a grudge in your heart because I won't let up. I'm doing this so that she doesn't die. She ended with a harsh tone, causing the blonde to glare at her for a moment before tearing his gaze away. She was right, but he didn't have to like it. Faye, whatever. Go kick that snake's ass and get me when you're done, Hinata. Chan, I'll be eating at Ichiraku's, he said, giving her a short hug, before dashing away into the woods. Hinata sighed, giving an apologetic look to her sensei. I'm sorry, Anko. Sensei, he's just a little fucking dense, overprotective, an idiot. Anko rattled off a few of her own adjectives, adding to the frown on Hinata's face, causing the older woman to give a sigh of her own. Listen, I don't mean to belittle the kid. He's got a ton of talent, and a tremendous amount of power. But he needs experience to go along with that power or he's a ticking time bomb. She sprawled out on her summon's head, scratching its scaly hide causing it to hum in satisfaction. That temper of his doesn't help either, and neither does his condition. Hinata nodded solemnly, both of them acutely aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki. She suddenly whipped her head to the side as a kunai came whizzing past her, a clear liquid dripping down the blade. Hinata narrowed her eyes, activating her Byakugan as more of the poisoned weapons came flying at her. Alright, enough of this talk, time to defend yourself. Naruto finished off his fourth bowl of ramen roughly, slamming the bowl on the table so hard it shattered in his hands. Tucci came out quickly upon hearing the sound, and looked alarmed upon seeing the broken dish. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Did you cut your hands at all? He asked, more concerned for the boy's well-being than one of his special extra large ramen bowls. Naruto nodded, looking guilty. I'm fine, it was my fault, I wasn't being careful. I'll pay for a new bowl for you, Tucci-san. The ramen vendor nodded, knowing full well that the boy would. Whenever you have the money, Naruto. But tell me, what has you so stressed, my boy? You were eating my ramen with a passion today, and not your usual one. This one was, how should I say, darker. The man crossed his arms, trying to find a way to put his thoughts into words. As a ramen master, I simply cannot remain idle while my favorite customer is eating with a dark aura. Naruto smiled lightly, touched that the man was so sensitive to his moods that he would notice something was amiss. It's nothing serious, Tuchi-san. I'm just worried. About what, Naruto-kun? Naruto hesitated. Hinata-chan. Tuchi nodded. Everyone knew of the Hyuga heiress and her crush on the boy, and Naruto had brought her to eat at his stand many times. She was a nice girl, very quiet though, although he had noticed a certain fiery quality in her, hidden beneath her gentle exterior. He could see why the boy was so attached to her, given his own passionate take on things. What about her, Naruto-kun? Is everything well with her? Well, yeah. Naruto started, his eyebrows furrowing. But, her sensei is very. He shook his head, unable to think of suitable adjectives for the woman in mind. Tuchi nodded, getting his meaning. So she's in danger from her training? Naruto shook his head. No, I just don't want her pushing herself too hard, you know? Naruto's eyebrows knitted together as Tuchi snorted, before letting out a short laugh. What's so funny? Naruto, my boy, how often do you train? Naruto shrugged his shoulders, caught off guard by the question. I don't know, something like 12.16 hours a day. And of that time, how many times are you almost at 0 chakra left? Or even, how many times do you get hurt while training, to the point where most people would stop? Naruto puffed his chest out proudly. I go longer and harder than most people. That's why I'll be the strongest one day. Just you wait, Tuchi-san, he declared, thumping his chest with his hand. Tuchi shook his head. That's exactly the point I'm getting to. Naruto tilted his head, slightly confused. You're pushing yourself very hard, giving yourself very little breaks to improve yourself as fast as possible, right? He asked patiently. Naruto nodded, before a slight "oh" appeared on his face. He bowed his head, ashamed at his actions from before. Hadn't Anko just told him that she was doing this for Hinata's benefit? To help protect her on missions? Tuchi nodded, satisfied that the boy's reaction had telegraphed his comprehension of the likeness between the situations. Good, you understand. Now, if it's worrying you this much, why don't you go on a mission to get your mind off of things? Naruto, recalling the words Anko had thrown at him about needing more experience, nodded. That's a good idea, old man. Thanks for the advice, and the ramen. I'll pay you back soon, he called, before entering the ramen stand. As soon as his face hit the public view, it was blank. A few villagers who had heard his voice from inside the stand were glaring at it, but immediately turned their heads as soon as they came into his view. Inside, Naruto sighed. They were afraid of him. An improvement to the hateful stares he was used to, but still not his end goal. Ever since his return, unless he was in the strict company of the handful of people he knew he could trust to some extent, Hinata, Tuchi, Jiraiya, the Hokage, even Anko after their first few meetings, this was the expression he wore. When on missions, this was to be his facade. Cold, emotionless, mechanical. The perfect shinobi. Ironically, he was the opposite of the mask he now wore. While he trusted very few, he really was a warm and caring person. To those who had shown him concern and friendship. Anyone else, especially these ignorant villagers. He turned down the main street, walking steadily towards the Hokage Tower. Many in the streets shunned away from him, even going so far as to avert their gaze, desperate not to invoke the demon's wrath. He watched as a ball rolled out of the crowd and towards his foot. He tensed up and moved his arm up to protect his face, thinking it may have been a spike or flash bomb, but nothing happened. It was just a regular ball. A small girl came running out of the crowd, freezing when she saw the boy picking it up. Naruto watched as a few fat tears rolled down her cheeks, obviously thinking that she would never get it back now that this strange boy had it. He slowly walked up to her, watching her freeze in fear and look around for her mother, who was nowhere to be found. He knelt down, and she flinched away. Is this your ball? She stared at him, wide-eyed, before nodding quickly. He smiled at her, not a large foxy one, but a small reassuring one, as he handed it to her. Be careful, if you lose this again it might get stepped on and popped, and then you wouldn't have this anymore, alright? She blinked before nodding, giving him a growing smile as she took the toy back. Thank you, Naruto, he said, patting her head. Nato, she squealed, a smile plastered on her face. Naruto's smile grew a little wider. What a cute little G.I. Get away from my daughter. His mask immediately returned as he stood up straight, looking the woman who was glaring at him straight in her eyes. She recoiled a little, but stood her ground holding her arms out. See. Come on, sweetie. Circa, come back to mommy, she said shakily, never taking her eyes off the blonde who just stared back passively. The little girl looked at her mom weirdly, before turning around and hugging Naruto's leg. He watched the woman's face contort, going from worried to horrified in the span of a second. Thank you, Nato. The girl said happily. I have to go to my mommy now, bye. She skipped back happily to her mom, who snatched her up and held her close, as if she thought the child would disappear at any moment. Mommy, Nato found my ball and gave it back to me, she said happily, showing her mother the ball excitedly as evidence. The woman paid her no mind though, glaring at the blonde genin with as much courage she could muster. Saint, stay away from her. You can't have her, shish. She's all I have left of Tomo, she finished, tears leaking from her eyes. Naruto's mask broke a little as he felt pity overwhelm him. She, like everyone else in this fucking town, truly believed that he was the Kyuubi. It wasn't necessarily her fault. She only wanted to protect her daughter. Her husband must have been a shinobi that was killed recently, and she was terrified of losing the remainder of her family. He took a step forward. Listen, miss, I'm not. Don't come near her. You fucking demon, stay away from my little girl, she screamed, taking a step back. Naruto seethed. Look, if you would just listen to me. And your lies? So you can corrupt me, and take my daughter away? You're vile. Go to hell where you belong, she yelled, desperately looking for a way out. Naruto was angry now. Why wouldn't they just listen? If they would only hear him out, they would see that he wasn't a bad guy. He wanted to protect them, not hurt them. That's why he became a shinobi, to protect himself, but also to protect those precious to him. And if these stupid assholes would just see that he wasn't the nine-tailed fox incarnate, they would be his precious people too. His eyes flashed red as he felt his anger come to a boil, and noticed the panicked expressions that several of the villagers were showing, thinking that he was about to kill them all. This is it, he's finally showing his true form. Oh god, not again, we just finished rebuilding. Someone get the Anbu, that thing is about to go on a rampage. Naruto shook his head violently, trying to expel the voices from his head, but his sensitive hearing picked up every word, transferring each message of hate directly into his conscious. Shut up. I don't want to hurt any of you. I want to protect you. I want you all to live long and happy. I want you to be happy. I just want to be happy. Shut up. Shut you pppppp, he bellowed, the Kyuubi's influence creeping into his voice and giving it a deep bass. The street fell silent and motionless, every last person looking towards the young boy who was breathing heavily, waiting for him to snap at any moment. Suddenly, he vanished, causing them all to whip their heads around in panic, making sure he wasn't about to claw his way through them from behind. When the tense moment passed, they all hurried on their way, obviously put off by their encounter with the Jinchuriki. A few started making their way to the Hokage Tower, intent on filing a complaint that the boy was going to go berserk and start murdering everyone soon. The little girl who had gotten her toy back stared at the spot the blonde boy had disappeared from, her small mind in distress. She tugged on her mother's sleeve to get her attention, causing the woman to look down at her and smile tightly. Yes, sweetie. Mommy. Why is Nato so sad? The woman's lips pursed. He isn't sad, honey. He's a very dangerous man who wants to hurt you. You need to promise mommy you'll stay away from him, okay? The little girl looked at her mother confused. Then why was he crying, mommy? The woman stared at her blankly, before picking her daughter up and started making their way home. She had no answer to that. Naruto stumbled into the Hokage's office seeing red, clutching the wall as he tried to calm himself. Sarutobi jumped at the unexpected intrusion into his office, looking worried as Naruto's eyes practically glowed red, bloody tears leaking from his eyes, his hands curled into tight fists that leaked his red life essence from where his now sharpened nails had punctured his palms. The older man walked over and placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder, although he said nothing. Naruto took deep breaths, feeling the comfort his surrogate grandfather bestowed upon him flowing through his body. His eyes gradually changed back to normal, his nails retracting from inside the skin of his hands. Naruto, what happened? Sarutobi asked when it seemed that the boy was sufficiently calm. Naruto took a deep breath through his nose and wiped his face of the scarlet tears before speaking. Villagers. He said simply, giving the old Hokage a look that spoke more than any words Naruto might have come up with. The leader sighed, pulling the boy into a fatherly embrace, which the boy returned gladly. They stayed that way for a while, Sarutobi thinking of the last wish Minato wanted, and Naruto wondering what he had to do to get through to the ignorant inhabitants of the village. "I'm sorry, Naruto," Sarutobi said, as if sensing Naruto's thoughts. "All of these people are still blinded by hate. Although 12 years seems a long time to you, to an old codger like me it's but a small part of our long histories," he said, smiling when Naruto chuckled at his remark of old codger. Naruto nodded, a frown replacing his small grin. "I don't know what I have to do to get them to see that I'm not it. I don't know if I'll ever get through to them," he finished sadly, a look of frustration on his face. Sarutobi nodded, thinking the same thing. It would take a miracle to get them to see the error of their ways, my boy. Or your father himself speaking to them. "I'm so sorry." "Hey, Gigi," Naruto said, driving the old man away from his remorseful thoughts. "Are there any teams going out on missions soon? Like, out of the village? Or any solo missions I can do?" he asked, an almost pleading tone in his voice. Sarutobi smiled before reaching towards his desk, grabbing a file. "As a matter of fact, I do Naruto-kun. Team 10 has just received a mission to guard a small trading caravan on its way to the south side of Fire Country." "Let's see," he said, looking closer at the file. "Low. C rank, guarding 2 wagons with a total of 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. Expected time for completion should be 4 days to travel to their destination, and a day and a half back once they're dropped off. An extra day or 2 can be taken, however, so the mission should take about a week." He finished, setting his pipe in his mouth and lighting it. "If you would like to assist on this mission, go find Team 10's sensei, Asuma Sarutobi." One of Naruto's eyebrows rose, but if he saw it, the Hokage didn't acknowledge it. "Tell him that I've given you my permission and recommendation to go along on this mission as single support. If he gives the okay, you are to meet with him and his team tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. sharp, packed for a week. Long mission. Do you understand?" he asked, peering over his pipe at Naruto. The blonde nodded excitedly, causing the old man to smile. "Wonderful. In that case, go find my son. He should be at the barbecue place by the Akamichi compound, I would expect. One of his pupils always ropes him into paying for his meals." He chuckled, obviously amused with the thought. Naruto nodded, smiling at the elderly Hokage before him. "Thank you, Gigi, this means a lot to me," he said, before bounding out of the room. Sarutobi chuckled to himself again, before his face grew very serious. "Salamander, you have something to report?" An Anbu mask seemed to bleed out of the darkness in one of the corners of the room. "Hokage Sama, it appears that he is on the move again. We're not sure if he's targeting the Uzumaki boy or the Uchiha, but his agents are moving, and fast." Sarutobi nodded. "Keep tails on both of them, and make sure they are not seen. I cannot express the importance of this. We could lose the trust of either of them if they detect that they're being followed, and even if we were to explain they might not understand. Keep extra care of Naruto, his skills are advancing quickly. Just make sure that the enemy agents do not interfere with them at all," he said, sitting down in his chair. The Anbu bowed his head, muttering, "Sir," before bleeding back into the shadows. Sarutobi sighed, leaning back in his chair. He was getting too old for this. The next morning, Naruto sighed, as he made several shadow clones with a bit more chakra than usual so that they would last more than a few hours. He ordered a few to keep studying various jutsu theories, some to keep his dingy apartment in as good a condition it could get, but the last one he pulled aside, much to the confusion of his other doppelgangers. "What's up, boss?" the clone whispered, obviously excited that he was singled out from the others. "Shish. I'm giving you a mission the others would kill to have. You, in particular," Naruto whispered back, both of them leaving the apartment. "Wah. Cool. I must be a badass," the clone whispered back excitedly, making Naruto sweat drop. He had actually just chosen one at random, but whatever helped his clone sleep at night. Did it sleep? Wait, did they have to eat? He shook his head, now was not the time for these thoughts. "You need to go and find Hinata-chan and tell her about the mission and when I'll be back," he whispered, looking around frantically. The clone had a flabbergasted expression on his face, before it pumped its fist excitedly. "Fuck yeah, that's the best. MMPHPHMHP, it tried to talk through Naruto's hand but found that it couldn't, unsurprisingly. "Shut the fuck up," Naruto whispered menacingly, looking to see if any clones were jumping out to challenge the clone for his job. When none did, he let go, glaring at the copy as it scratched its head in embarrassment. "Sorry boss, just got a little excited. I'll make sure she knows, don't worry," it said, before leaping off into the sunrise to find the princess. Naruto sighed before making his way towards the gates. He didn't really want to leave her, but he seriously needed a break from the villagers. and Hinata's crazy sensei. As he neared the gates, he spotted the members of Team 10, and almost let his mask slip to let out a groan. This is gonna be a long mission. As she threw herself into his arms and sobbed into his chest, he cried, "Huh? Oh, I'm sorry Hinata-chan. I didn't mean to beat up your family member guy. If you're mad at me oof. N. Naruto, I thought Y.U.D. died," she sobbed as she held him close. Naruto held Jiraiya close to him, just as he had done when he first met her, recalling how angry he had been when he thought she would harm him. Before his head abruptly perked up toward his house, Naruto said proudly, "It's okay. I fooled that guy good though. As soon as I dropped that smoke bomb I Kawarami'd with a clone that was hidden in the trees and then made more to set up for that combo attack. He didn't even know what hit him. He picked up Hinata and hanged into Kobu, shuddering. He arrived. Nagato.ni isn't happy. Let's go, I'll take you back home Hinata-chan." Hinata nodded, closing her eyes because she was worn out from the sudden shift in mood. As a number of ideas rushed through her head, she relaxed and dozed off in the hanged boy's arms. "I need to get stronger. I have to keep Naruto safe." Silently, Naruto observed Jiraiya pacing back and forth while pointing daggers at the man who was restrained and seated in the center of their training area. The man's pupilless eyes showed no emotion as he stared back blankly. With a growl, Jiraiya stomped in the dirt with one of his wooden sandals. He pointed to his kunai pouch angrily and said, "For attempting to murder a child, please, explain to me this." "Explain to me, again, why I shouldn't just kill you right now." The man remained silent and kept watching the Sannin argue with himself about the punishment he would get. A tower of the child had been waiting to catch him after he had been launched several hundred feet by the child's wind jutsu. After swiftly tying him up, they took him to the Toad Sage, who wasn't particularly pleased with the tale Naruto had to share. Since then, he had waited for his decision because it appeared that the Sannin wanted to handle things himself, just like he had done with the villagers before. The old man's head turned to face Naruto as he said, "Gigi, I don't think you should kill him." What Kubo had just heard was barely audible. The demon forfeiting the opportunity to kill someone. He must be attempting some sort of deception. He destroyed any emotion that was attempting to grow, including astonishment, perplexity, or anything that would cause him to change his mind and support the demon. He refused to accept it. "What? He just tried to kill you, Naruto, and if you hadn't thought as fast as you did, you'd probably be dead right now. The Hyuga are dangerous. I've told you that many times before, and your best chance of winning would be to have one underestimate you, which is what appears happened." Naruto nodded, and looked towards the Hyuga, who stared back with a little bit of deep-seated hatred in his eyes. This caused Naruto to appear somewhat depressed, which nearly brought the sense of bewilderment back to the surface for Kubo, who swiftly smothered it. With a radiant smile, he began, "I know. But, to Jiraiya, he was just trying to protect Hinata-chan, even if he did it for reasons that were wrong. And that means he's a good person." Jiraiya and Kubo gazed at the boy, gaping. "Because I was keeping her safe? Why the fuck would he care about that? Hyuga Sama told us that when that monstrosity was spotted close to her, he was going to plant his demon seed in her after poisoning her mind anyhow. Why would he want me to survive because I stood in his way? This is illogical." Jiraiya rubbed his face in frustration and uttered, "Naruto. Just because he did it for a noble cause doesn't make what he did With a gleam of intelligence in his eyes, Naruto interrupted, "So it isn't right that our shinobi kill criminals, even if it seems right to us? I hold the Kyuubi inside me, just like you told me Gigi, and even though I'm just its jailer, many people still think that I'm it. They truly believe it, which is why I've never had any friends." He continued, appearing alone. "That's why I don't want to hurt them back. They just want to protect their precious people. Like I want to protect you, or Nagato.ni, or Hinata-chan. That guy just wanted to protect her from me, since I'm the demon to him, so I don't want him to die." Jiraiya sat down on a stone and looked at Kubo long and hard, and he stared back with a growing anxiety. What was the reason behind the demon's sympathetic speech? Why would a demon be interested in humans? Why would a demon be important to both the Sannin and the Hokage? What would happen if the boy wasn't a demon? Kubo's eyes grew as big as dinner plates as that hit him with the force of a ton of bricks. Even though he believed the child to be the Kyuubi no Kitsune, he had been attempting to kill a Childa not even through the Academia because it was still a child. He had tried to end a child's life before they were even 7 years old by using a Juken strike to destroy their mind. Carefully observing the man's facial expressions, Jiraiya saw right away when the man began to display regret. Since it was among the first he had seen, his rage soon began to fade. He sighed and nodded as he turned to see Naruto staring at him pleadingly. Naruto approached the man who was saddened by the child's gaze. Naruto. The man remained where he was when Naruto pulled out a kunai and cut his ropes. I've always thought, everyone said, I didn't. With a few tears streaming down his cheeks, Naruto turned and walked away. Before he swiftly vanished into the woods on the edge of the clearing, he said, I hate you, but I don't want you dead. Please don't let them take Hinata-chan away from me. After him, Kubo stared blankly as his mind struggled to process the information he had just inferred. Pulling the man up by the rumple of his shirt, Jiraiya got up and approached him. He growled, now you listen here. Hinata is the only friend that boy has, and he cherishes her above even me at times. If it weren't for him, you'd be digesting in a frog's stomach by now, I promise you that. Kubo swallowed, perspiration beginning to trickle down his brow as he grasped the full force of the Sanin's wrath. You had better do everything in your power to make sure that Hiashi doesn't interfere with their friendship, because if I find out that you let something slip by because you doubted that child again, I will make sure that every moment from then on will be filled with pain you can only imagine, he said as he threw the Hyuga into the... Kubo nodded and slowly stood up. Gazing up at the man, he began, I understand Jiraiya. Sama, I am truly sorry, but... His eyes were filled with confusion. That boy. Why? Is he not the demon? I thought for sure. Jiraiya adopted a frustrated and empathetic expression. I told them they shouldn't stop teaching Fuinjutsu in the academy. Look, if I were to seal a kunai into a scroll, does that make the scroll a kunai? Kubo gave a little enlightened look and shook his head. Jiraiya gave a nod. You understand. Why should it be different for that boy? The Kyuubi's chakra was sealed inside him, but he's simply acting as its container. Just because it's inside him, doesn't mean he is it. Trust me, we'd all have been gone for a long time now if it was any different. After a week, on Cloud 9, Naruto walked home. Hinata was laughing freely for the first time, which always made him feel good, and he had just finished pushing her on the park swing. He wished she would laugh more because it was so lovely. He froze as he turned a corner. There were several individuals wearing masks, and they were most definitely not Anbu. As they did the same, he stood motionless, his thoughts whirling with potential ways out. Clones, split, substitute, ground, construction, no, too many, more? He let out an inward groan as he sensed multiple additional presences emerge behind him. This was planned, this was coordinated. Suddenly, a body with a tortured expression on its face and a no Isa was thrown at him. They had vanished entirely, however, the face. Naruto turned pale. What, Kubo? The man at the head of the formation said, I'm glad to see you recognize this traitor. It seems you managed to poison his mind, for he was going to go and warn you about our little plan. Unfortunately for him, he was in the branch family, and it's very simple to activate their seals to force them to submit. It seems I put a little too much chakra into the seal though. No matter, he is replaceable. With a furious expression on his face, Naruto looked up. He screamed and then charged at the man, saying, You killed him because he wanted to help me. Why didn't you just lock him up or something? He didn't deserve to die. A fist buried itself deep in his stomach, knocking the wind out of him and sending him flying back a few feet to the ground, where he doubled in on himself, clutching his stomach and struggling to breathe. The man kicked Naruto in the head, causing him to wheeze in agony, and said, Ignorant demon, if you had corrupted his mind so much that you didn't want him to die, he was obviously a loyal servant, and therefore a danger to everyone in the clan and compound. You will not live to see this night, you can join your companion in the afterlife. Jiraiya pushed himself as quickly as he could, pumping even more chakra into his legs. If he ever found himself in danger, he had sensed the surge in Naruto's chakra from their practice, but he hadn't anticipated encountering multiple strategically placed traps around their house. Before he could begin moving in the direction of the spike, he had to spend a few valuable minutes weaving through them, which seemed to have been laid by shinobi of high Junin level. As he flew through some hand signals and called forth a few toads, he thought frantically, Where are you, Gaki? Please be okay. He yelled, Find Naruto, and they all instantly dispersed. He wished he hadn't arrived too late. After a few tense minutes, he signaled that he had located him by sending a ball of air into the sky. Jiraiya hurried over to where he saw it right away and discovered the toad staring down. Jiraiya stared at the wall of the alley they were in and trailed off, Hiruta, what's the... Matt. N.No. This was. With a few tears streaming down his face, Jiraiya choked out, Gee. Get me. Med. Naruto was barely able to breathe. Kid, you can't die. Little Hinata was staring at Naruto's body pinned to the wall when he heard tiny footsteps running against the pavement behind him. He turned around and swiftly dispatched whoever had come to hurt his godson by slapping a kunai out. She sagged against the wall and extended a hand in his direction as her eyes grew wide. Naruto. A man wheeled around the corner and tried to grab the girl, but he was confronted by a bloodthirsty Jiraiya. Hinata. Sama, you don't want to see WH. The man fell asleep after receiving a quick chop to the neck, and he swiftly seized Hinata and dragged her out of the alley so she wouldn't have to see it any longer. She was still so young. Her eyes were still open when he looked down, but she was hunched over. With tears streaming from her eyes like a river, she kept muttering to herself. He created a shadow clone and gave her to it since nothing he did could wake her from her trance. With a nod, it bounded off in the direction of the Hyuga compound. Jiraiya felt his determination grow as he turned back to face the blonde. They were unable to remain here. When Hinata awoke, she rubbed her eyes and tried to recall what had happened the night before. The memory of the nightmare made her tremble. She was unable to keep Naruto safe after he was killed. Eager to see him and get rid of the negative thoughts, she hurriedly jumped out of bed and began getting ready. She saw Naruto wasn't there to welcome her when one of the branch members dropped her off in front of the academy. She walked timidly to their classroom, feeling a little depressed but thinking there must be a good reason. She glanced up at their seats, but neither he nor she saw him. She worriedly sat down by herself for the first time since Naruto had approached and spoken to her, and anxiety began to grow in her stomach. Thinking of all the trouble Naruto had gotten into and what he might be doing this time, she started to poke her index fingers together. Last night, she remembered her nightmare. She bit back a few tears and shook her head. That would never occur. Iruka entered the room shortly after the other children did. Naruto is still absent. As her sensei gathered his papers at his desk, she hurriedly descended the stairs and approached him. Iruka turned to Hinata and said politely, Oh, yes Hinata? With an expression of sadness, Hinata inquired, where's Naruto? K.Kun? Iruka's expression rapidly went blank, and her level of fear increased slightly. Though he sounded a little more reserved, he said politely, I'll tell the class. Please go sit down Hinata. She nodded and walked slowly up the stairs, feeling worse and worse in her stomach. Iruka stood on the podium and gazed sorrowfully out at the students. Students, last night, Naruto was attacked. Hinata's face began to lose its color. It was an awful nightmare, an awful nightmare, an awful nightmare. Won't be joining us in class for some time. Naruto cannot be harmed. I promised to protect him, and I must do so. Gone for the next several years. Hinata jerked her head up. WH. What did you say, sensei? Iruka gave the young Hyuga a pitying glance. I said that Jiraiya Sama is taking Naruto away from the village to train him personally for the next few years. Iruka's protests were ignored as Hinata quickly sprang from her seat. She hurried through the hallways and out the front door, heading straight for the route that would take her to Naruto's house. She dashed to the front door as quickly as her small legs would allow, then knocked frantically, checking behind her to see if anyone was pursuing. Nagato. An orange-haired man with numerous piercings, emerged as the door opened. She discovered that the stoic man was actually pretty pleasant after meeting him several times when she came to watch Naruto train. Nagato. N.Ni.san. WH. Where? If you're here looking for Naruto, then he is already gone. Hinata felt the tears well up again and escape her eyes as her heart fell. She hadn't even known him for a full year, and she would not see him for years. As the young girl sat on the ground and began to cry, Nagato watched with a hint of sadness. Since they were genuinely close, Jiraiya was against their separation, but he felt that Naruto's safety came first, so it had to be done. Nagato extracted a letter from his cloak and let it drift softly in the direction of the girl, who sniffed at it. Wiping the tears from her eyes, she muttered, WH. What's this? He turned around and activated a number of seals on the door before saying, a letter from Jiraiya, sensei. Naruto would have written in it as well, but he had not yet regained consciousness. You would do well to leave this area now. The seals will activate on these grounds in approximately 1 hour, rendering anyone who comes here a painful greeting. We will communicate with you as best we can while gone, but you will not see Naruto until you graduate. I am sorry it has come to this, but know that all 3 of us will miss you greatly while gone. Nagato's voice softened towards the end, expressing his grief about having to go. Hinata rubbed her eyes and sniffed. Why though? I'll miss him a lot. No one else wants to be my friend. Nagato helped her stand up and gazed up at the passing clouds. What do you fight for, young heiress? Hinata sniffed once more, her expression bewildered. Huh? The man with the piercings gave her a serious look. What drives you to become a good shinobi, to stand out among the rest? Hinata cast her gaze downward. IW. Want to M. Make my father proud. And M.My clan. And. She was blushing. IW. Want to protect N Naruto. Nagato gave a nod. All noble reasons. However, you need to become much stronger if you wish to protect Naruto. His enemies will be very powerful, I can promise you that. Looking down, Hinata encircled herself with her arms. Why? I cannot tell you. But know this. I am not telling you these things for no reason. Use your sadness, your bitterness that we are gone, and use it to focus. Train yourself hard for the time we are gone, so that when we come back, you may look upon Naruto as your equal, and stand by his side once again while being able to protect him as you wish to do. Hinata gave a blank nod, grasping the essence of his meaning but not fully grasping it. Holding the letter tightly, she began to return to the path. She remained in that state all the way to a tiny clearing where she occasionally played with Naruto. She sobbed while curled up on the ground. She was alone because Nagato had already left. Similar to how she was before Naruto and how she would be going forward. By myself. After reading the letter, she opened it and took 2 items out of the container. The first was a picture of her and Naruto holding up the turtles they had captured at the pond and grinning broadly at the camera. She realized right away that this picture was now her most valuable possession and that she needed to do everything in her power to keep it safe. According to Nagato, the second was a letter, this one from Jiraiya. For the time being, she chose to ignore it and keep staring at the picture until she returned home to read it before turning in for the night. Hinata, I apologize that we had to depart in this manner, but at this moment, Naruto's safety comes first. We have to protect him until he recovers because he needs to get stronger before he can return. I must tell you something about last night, but I'm getting ahead of myself. You did not have that dream. We must depart because that is what the villagers believe Naruto is entitled to. It will be up to him to explain why they despise him so much when we return, which will be after you graduate from the academy. I beg you not to press him to tell you, even though he already knows. Please believe me when I say that this is a delicate subject. I understand that hearing this will make you very sad, but don't worry. I'll try to persuade the Hokage to put the 2 of you on a team, and Naruto will return in time to get one. When all you have is each other on the battlefield, your close bond can be extremely helpful. In the meantime, put in a lot of training so you can convince old man Hokage that you are worthy of joining his team. I can assure you that the years will pass by swiftly. Since you're too young to fully comprehend this, I advise you to save this letter and read it again occasionally to ensure you understand everything. Don't worry about Naruto. He will be safe with me. I'll make an effort to write to you occasionally, and Naruto will undoubtedly want to do the same. We will return before you know it, so don't worry. Jiraiya. After 5 years. Perched atop a tree, 2 figures gazed over the canopy to the massive, imposing gates of Konoha, which stood watchfully guarded. It was a sight they both welcomed. On the other hand, it was nerve-wracking to one, but he kept his expression calm and unimpressed. Looking at his partner, the older man crossed his arms and said menacingly, "Are you ready? Once we enter, there's no going back." His partner silently followed him as he leapt down from the tree and said, "I have no choice but to be ready. I've been gone for too long, and I feel my luck has run out. I need to be there to protect them in case something happens. That being said, we're wasting time, our enemies could be on the move as we speak. Let's go." Sighing, Hinata stretched out on the ground below her and gazed up at the clouds. Naturally, she had graduated, but there was nothing more to do because everyone else had finished their tests, and those students were dismissed until 3 p.m. Furthermore, it was just midday. She had nothing to do after being done for more than an hour. Aside from perhaps train. She gave a headshake. She would be meeting her Junin sensei today, so there was no point in exhausting herself. In order to become an official genin and demonstrate her strength to her father and to herself, she wanted to look extremely presentable, strong, and capable. Naruto, too. She let out another sigh. The last time she had heard from Jiraiya was more than a year ago. He claimed that although they had visited often in the years after Naruto's departure, it wasn't always feasible for them to send out a letter because of the increasing intensity of the training and the danger of the places they visited. As promised, their frequency had decreased to once every few months before they stopped altogether. More than a year had passed since the blonde's last letter to her, in which he expressed his longing for her. Every day, with all his heart. Before he left, she had that specific letter and the photo of the 2 of them together sealed in a locked box. She blushed a little, picturing his current appearance. Under a waterfall, she imagined how he would appear without his shirt on. He was probably still short, had some baby fat on him. They were only 12 after all, and had lean muscle. She continued to daydream while gazing at the clouds, oblivious to the small amount of blood trickling from her nose. She was immediately alerted by a spooky laugh coming from the forest, and she flipped up, assuming the Jukin stance. Without saying a word, she turned on her Byakugan and frantically looked through the trees for the source of the noise, but she couldn't find it. Before noticing the blood on her cheek, she released the breath she had been holding. She rubbed it away after blushing pink, relieved that no one was around to witness her display of such twisted thinking. She was the princess of the clan and the good girl of the Hyuga. Her father was very proud of her strength and her near-perfect neji skills. Naruto was responsible for everything. She was inspired to push herself beyond her comfort zone and train harder than she ever would have otherwise because of Jiraiya's and Nagato's words to her, as well as his encouragement before he left, which she replayed in her mind every single day. She used to be on the verge of falling behind Hanabi in skill, but now she always managed to put her sister on her butt, even though she did it as gently as possible to avoid hurting the young girl. Neji had to concentrate and avoid rushing into fights with her carelessly, lest she take advantage of those weaknesses and win their spars, whereas previously he could playfully toy with her and flaunt himself to anyone on the sidelines. Additionally, she had started working on her stealth skills from Stal, watching Naruto, based on the positive remarks Jiraiya wrote on the paper, which she hoped the blonde hadn't seen. She had learned that there were other useful applications for the ability she had acquired to shield her crush from a distance. After self-training, she was able to sneak up on a fat cat, whom she later identified as Tora, and give it to the Genin team, who approached her with immense relief that they were no longer forced to deal with the foolish creature. In order to serve Konoha, she followed various troublemakers, drunks, and dubious businesspeople. By alerting the local Anbu or Junin to situations before they started, she gained the favor of many of the shinobi in the village. Before becoming an official shinobi, she was a villager and an academy student. In their dog-eat-dog world, they had hardly heard of this person. Selflessness was a highly valued trait that was, regrettably, far too frequently taken advantage of. However, Hinata would recognize those circumstances and use her Byakugan to separate the people who were lying from those who were actually in need of assistance. And as a result, she became stronger. All in all, she was making rapid progress. She was a little embarrassed that she had no other interests besides training and caring for her flower garden, but that didn't take long. It happened so fast that it even made her a little afraid. Train, 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 eat, train, sleep, attend a clan meeting, read Naruto's letters, train, train, train. If she were to be honest with herself, she felt a little relieved that she had trained as much as she had. It made the time fly by, and as Jiraiya had mentioned, the few years she had to spend apart from Naruto actually went by quite swiftly. She was fine except for the fact that she missed him every single second of every day and that he occasionally appeared in her dreams to wipe away the tears she wanted to shed due to their distance from one another. And he would return shortly. Remembering this made her eyes light up, and she made the decision to go get a treat. A delicious, freshly baked cinnamon bun, a memento of her triumph, and Naruto's impending comeback. After all, Jiraiya stated that Naruto needed to appear for a test in order to be placed on a team and pass. Though it wasn't required that he take the test on the same day as everyone else. He was a unique case. After all, she questioned whether he was expected to return today since they were getting teams later. She hoped so. The thought that he might miss the deadline and have to wait another year made her stomach drop a little. Therefore, he might not be added to her team. So even when he returns, we'll never see each other again, Hinata thought somberly as she bit into her cinnamon bun. She practically moaned in ecstasy as soon as the pastry touched her taste buds, quickly scanning her surroundings to make sure no one was observing her. Apart from fantasizing about a particular blonde, her hormones were raging. After all, it was only natural, she told herself. And not wanting anyone to know, this was her one guilty pleasure. From somewhere in front of her, she heard a faint hitching of breath as she took another bite and felt some of the melted icing start to run down her chin. She whipped her eyes back and forth and narrowed them, but she could still see no one. This was odd. She gave a headshake. Meeting her new sensei, who would decide the kind of team she would be on, who she would look up to, and everything that involved at least the next year of her life must have affected her, as she was becoming paranoid. In relation to that, she was positive she heard the teachers announcing the teams to the children, but she had not been informed of her own. Before she walked through the shopping district, she shrugged and popped the remaining cinnamon bun in her mouth with a final shiver of joy. She watched with idle fascination as all the different people wasted their money on ridiculous-looking clothing. As Hinata watched the woman spend 40,000 yen on a silky-looking kimono, she thought, I'll never understand why anyone would pay that much just for one kimono. No matter how nice it looks. Although it was gorgeous, she would prefer to use her money for more useful items like ninja tools, a new jacket, or some handcu. Her cheeks flushed a little as she slapped her head. Oh, poor Hinata. She had started to think more and more perverse thoughts after spending so much time with Shino's friend Kiba and being separated from Naruto. Stupid mutt, can't stop talking about mating. Hinata stammered, even in her own imagination, as the enchanted word flashed through her mind with a blonde. She felt her cheeks turn a tomato red as she heard loud, boisterous laughter this time. No one seemed to be making the noise, but a number of people looked in the direction of the source. It was just gone. Hinata shivered, her mind darkening at once. The thought crossed her mind, this is no coincidence. Someone is following me. Her eyes silently opened as she looked for hidden chakra signatures. She sighed, clearly annoyed. None. What was happening? Before she started hopping back to the academy, she hurried onto the closest rooftop. Even though she was a few hours early, it was preferable to feeling like a predator was observing her every move. In fact, a pair of eyes watched the violet-haired girl run off with a look of amusement. Without a word, the figure sprang from his hiding place and ran after her, making sure he was out of her line of sight. He had no intention of getting caught today, but he was determined to see her. He promised himself that he would only observe for a short while longer before introducing himself. Walking through one of the more densely forested training areas, Hinata let out a dejected sigh. She had returned to the academy in the hopes that her Junin-sensei would arrive, but she had not been successful. She even inquired about her team, but was merely told to return later so she could learn more. Fantastic. She kicked a rock absently. This was nonsense. She was eager to begin. Her goal was to establish her worth as a Konoha shinobi, and earn Naruto's approval. During his absence, she had come to the realization that she liked him more than just as his best friend. She loved that, of course, but she wanted more, felt entitled to a little selfishness. Naturally, she would wait as long as necessary, but she hoped that after being separated from her for so long, he would feel the same way. It was wishful thinking, but she had hope. She was spinning at the same time that a branch broke suddenly and she saw a figure in a brown cloak hurrying toward her through the dense forest. The figure twisted at the last second, avoiding her outstretched arm and piercing her in the stomach, sending them both to the ground where they rolled for a good 15 feet. She had raised her palm, gathering chakra to juken her assailant in the face. Hinata struggled as best she could against her enemy, who had her tightly grasped from behind, and gasped as she attempted to fill her lungs. She was at a disadvantage since she had to disengage before they could break one of her limbs or stab her with a kunai. When she heard a choked sob, she lifted her arm and was ready to quickly elbow the person in the face. She heard, "Ta-chan," before realizing that the person was merely holding her, arms wrapped around her waist from behind, rather than attacking. With shaky hands, she reached back and pulled back the hood, exposing spiky blonde hair. I recognized that voice, she thought. Still unable to see his face because it was buried in her back, she sputtered out, N. The boy simply tightened his grip on her and planted a gentle kiss on her back without saying anything. She shuddered. Her whole being resonated with joy as the blonde choked out, I missed you. So much. Hinata-chan, and lifted his head to meet her eyes. She muttered, Naruto-kun, before she turned to face him and buried her head in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably and clinging to him while he stroked her hair and whispered comforting words. The boy she had loved for more than half of her life was finally back in her life and within arm's reach, bringing to the surface all the loneliness she had been suppressing as well as the pain and emptiness she had been feeling for the previous 5 years. They remained in that position for a long time, Hinata wiping away the last of her tears as he caressed her hair and held her close to his chest. Then, she sniffed and leaned back to gaze at his face. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. There was still some baby fat left, which would only go away with age, but most of it had vanished, replaced by the slender face of a fighter. She wanted to run her hands through his long, unruly hair to feel how it felt, but it still had that soft, fleecy look, as if he hadn't had a haircut since she'd last seen him. But his eyes of this was something she hadn't anticipated. He still had the same soft, open eyes that had once been kind, but only to a certain extent. She could see a certain hardness in them, a look that said he was aware of the cruelties the world could inflict on you and expected you to handle them without protest. Even though those eyes were identical, they were very different. She noticed that the blonde was staring back at her, and her cheeks were flushed. He was thinking the same thing, examining her now that he could see her clearly. Her cheeks, which had previously been round, now had a pleasing curve, and her whole face appeared more elegant and, he supposed, lovely. As he felt her body against his, he blushed, remembering what else time, and puberty, had done to the young Hyuga. Her womanly hips slid against his body, and he felt her expanding chest press against his. Intoxicated, he breathed in her aroma. God, he missed her. Now that he was back, she was all his once more. Hinata looked up at him and said, N. Naruto.kun. He indicated that he was paying attention by tilting his head. Where did that scar on your chest come from? He scowled as he looked down and saw that his cloak had somehow come loose, exposing his muscular chest along with a thick scar that ran in a jagged line from over his heart to his hip. He scowled as a sinister recollection arose, and then he shuddered and took a sharp breath when he felt her finger tracing the injured flesh. She frowned and muttered, it must have hurt, oblivious to the positive impact her touch was having on the young boy. As he watched her eyes search for any more wounds he might have received, he felt his own blush begin to appear. She blushed at the new pet name and raised an embarrassed eyebrow when he said, D. Don't worry Hina. Chan. Th. There aren't any more. Just that one. After giving him a nod, as if realizing her position, she took her hand off his exposed skin and just held him once more. I missed you. Naruto. K.kun. Grinning, he pressed his head against hers and gave her another squeeze. I missed you too, Hinata. Chan. Naruto had returned to his usual attire, which included a black and orange jacket and black, standard shinobi pants that he claimed had a secret, which made Hinata wonder what he might be hiding. It didn't surprise her to see orange on the boy's clothes because she knew it was his favorite color. Before they emerged onto Konoha's main street and headed towards the academy, they had strolled through the training ground, discussing unimportant topics. Hinata never did discover who was following her, even though she had asked Naruto, and he had denied anything other than finding her and spearing her in the woods in excitement. Hinata was taken aback by the shift in Naruto's posture and eyes as soon as they entered the public. The boy who had recently held her in the woods and with whom she had played years before were no longer there. This person kept to himself, trusted no one, and took no chances. He had icy eyes that darted back and forth in search of potential dangers. When one of the villagers recognized him and gave him a glare, he shot one back that caused the man to urinate in his pants. She felt a little afraid. This was not Naruto, the kind, affectionate boy she had fallen in love with. However, she saw a portion of the cold exterior melt away as soon as her terrified eyes met his, transforming his icy blue eyes into the warm, deep ocean blue she could gaze into indefinitely. Until a plate aimed at his head was caught by his whirling hand behind him. His icy stare came back, and he slowly turned his head back to see who had done it. When the civilians saw the demon back in their quiet village, he decided to try to chase him away while he was doing the dishes on his front porch. Unfortunately, this was not the same defenseless boy who had previously been mauled by the village. This one was unique. The plate in the boy's hands abruptly broke into countless pieces, causing his face to turn pale. What had he done? He didn't even move his hand. His arm erupted in blood, and he let out a howl of pain. He noticed one of the plate fragments lodged in his tricep when he looked down. With Hinata at his side, Naruto left without saying anything more. She gave him a sad look. He didn't want to return in this manner, but she felt a little better after receiving another tender look from her crush. His voice was a little bitter as he said, I knew this would happen. I didn't exactly want to come back, but Gigi said I had to if I wanted to become an official shinobi. Dot and I wanted to see you, he said with anticipation. She grinned as her face began to warm up. He was still the hyperactive, affectionate boy she knew, even though he now displayed a colder side. The thought of what she was going to do made her blush even more, so she reached down and took his hand, holding it firmly while trying not to think about it. She could swear she saw a faint flush of his own before he turned his gaze back to the main path with a smile on his face. She felt his eyes turn to her in surprise. He intertwined his fingers with hers, and she smiled back at him. The villagers' verbal abuse of the recently returned demon was reflected in their ecstatic bubble. Naruto smiled sadly at Hinata as he entered the building and informed him that he needed to go to classroom A.4 to pick up his assignment. Hinata received this information with a bright smile and an excited voice, announcing that the classroom he was expected to attend was the same as hers. Given that different teams were expected to meet their respective Junin sensei in different classrooms, there was a good chance that they were on the same team. At this, Naruto also grinned broadly, as if he was overjoyed to have the fair-eyed beauty as a teammate. With their fingers still clasped together, they walked into the room and looked at the lone other person there. When the aforementioned figure turned to face them, Shino was visible. Naruto's icy mask swiftly came back on, but Hinata's radiant smile persisted. To the chagrin of one blonde, Hinata said, Hi Shino.kun, and released Naruto's hand to go greet him. Are you here to receive your team assignment too? Shino looked from one to the other and nodded. Gazing at the blonde, he said, I am. It's good to see you again, Naruto-kun. With his calculating glare still fixed on the Aburame, the boy remained silent. When Hinata saw this, she glanced back and gave herself a quick slap across the forehead. Oh, Naruto-kun. I forgot to tell you, Shino-kun here is my friend. After you left, I remembered you said that he talked to you like normal instead of like the rest. I decided to ask for help one day when it came to setting traps, and we've been friends ever since, she said with a grin. As Naruto gazed at Shino, a small feeling of jealousy crept into his thoughts. The boy's sunglasses obscured any emotion Naruto could have seen in his eyes as he stared back impassively. Naruto recalled the simple exchange that made him happy when Shino asked him how he was able to throw a kunai straight. He gradually relaxed, his icy demeanor changing into a tentatively amiable one. With a crooked smile, he said, Shino. It's been a while. Shino grinned and nodded, lowering his coat slightly. I'm glad to see you again, Naruto-kun, the real you, I might add. May I ask what happened to force you to adopt a mask like that? Hinata scowled slightly as Naruto shook his head and laughed bitterly. Maybe some other time, but it's not something I like talking about. After giving a nod, Shino returned to his seat. Well, either way, I'm glad you trust me enough to let me see you. I hope you've grown strong in your years away from the village, because most of the class has grown sick of Sasuke, and I'd be glad to see you kick his ass, pardon my language, he added out of nowhere. Naruto shook his head amusedly and laughed. That Teme is still being a little prick and acting high and mighty. Didn't he learn his lesson when I handed him his own ass last time? Oh well, I'll see to it that he remembers he isn't the almighty Prince Uchiha the next time we get to fight. Naruto promised, which caused Shino to giggle. He turned to Hinata after saying, I'd appreciate that. So, it looks like we'll all be on the same team. I just wonder which Junin will be teaching us. Naruto crept up beside her, keeping close to her, and Hinata shrugged, blushing a little. I don't can. No, I haven't heard anything about it yet, just that I needed to be in here by late afternoon if no one approached me. When Shino asked Naruto a question, he was met with a similar shrug. I took my test earlier and was told the same thing. Hinata gave Naruto a sidelong glance and raised an eyebrow. You never told me that you had taken your test. What was it? Naruto grinned broadly. It's a secret. Let's just say that I got to see some interesting stuff. Though perplexed by what he said, Hinata chose not to ask questions. I thought he was dead. That was the crucial point. With relief that their Junin sensei had at last made the decision to appear, they all turned their heads as the door opened. Astoundingly, though, it was the Hokage who entered through the sliding door, smiling kindly at each of them. Naruto yelled, Hokage! Gigi! Before jumping into the man's arms and giving him a hug. With a happy laugh, the Hokage gave the young shinobi a hug in return. He stroked the boy's hair and said, It's good to see you again, Naruto. After pouting, Naruto leapt with excitement. Naruto exclaimed, Are you our sensei Gigi? With a look of anticipation. Sarutobi let out a laugh and shook his head. Naruto shrugged, his eyes showing a hint of disappointment. Oh well, I can dream, can't I? Naruto closed his mouth to concentrate on the elderly leader as he cleared his throat. Hinata's eyes widened in shock and disappointment as he said, No, and, on the same subject, the three of you will not have the same sensei seeing as how you're not on the same team. Naruto's eyes narrowed in annoyance. Hinata and Sarutobi gave Naruto a disbelieving look as he sarcastically asked, Then why were we told to meet in the same room? Surely not just so you could bring together three people who would enjoy being together and crush their hopes? Shino simply left the comment for a later time. No Naruto, of course I wouldn't, there is most certainly a reason for this. He said. As their leader went on, the three recently appointed genin felt their jaws drop. The three of you will not be on any three-man cell, on account of your skills being requested in specialty divisions within our ranks. Shino, due to your natural ability to both detect and quickly set up traps, as well as your skill with your Kakecha, you were being requested to train under Ibiki Morino as a forward scout and torture expert within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept? Shino fixed his sunglasses with one finger and nodded. I would be honored to, Hokage. Sama. Sarutobi nodded before turning to Hinata and Naruto, who was now hovering just behind the young Hyuga, who was attempting to control her emotions as his breath tickled the back of her neck and caused blood to rush to her face. Naruto, due to your prowess in combat, tactical genuineness, and exceptional stealth abilities, you are being requested to continue to train under the Toad Sage Jiraiya, doing solo missions that I see fit to send you on, or going along as support with other three-man cells. In these instances, you are not required to listen to the Junin sensei of the team in times of combat. Seeing as how you have much experience under your belt at this point, but in any other instances you are to recognize their rank and take orders as they see fit. Do you accept? He said, staring critically at Naruto. Naruto gave a nod. Sarutobi let out a small sigh of relief. Being somewhat of a wild card, Naruto was unsure of what he would do if the boy declined the offer. The boy's best option was to go alone, and it had been a pain in the ass to convince the council of this, through a lot of threats and reminders of who they were dealing with. He looked over at Hinata, who was standing up straight and wearing a determined look. Seeing the fire burning fiercely in her eyes, he grinned. Hinata, due to your exceptional stealth skills, tracking skills, and specialty in taijutsu, you are being requested to train under Mitarashi Anko as a specialist assassin within the Konoha Intelligence Corps. Do you accept? He watched as Hinata's eyes widened with joy before becoming slightly upset and shifting to Naruto's motionless form. Sarutobi gave a small laugh. Hinata-chan, you don't have to worry. Naruto will have some control over who he supports, and you won't be sent on assassination missions for a while. This will be your job eventually, but in the meantime, Anko is just there to guide your training to see where you need improvement on your current skills, before expanding to infiltration and other such subjects. You will be free to train with others in your free time, and aid other teams in missions, should they request you. He emphasized the last sentence, glancing at Naruto, who instantly understood and broke into a broad smile. With a big smile on her face, Hinata nodded and blushed slightly when she felt Naruto grab her hand behind her. I accept, Hokage-sama. With a smile, Hiruzen held up his arms. Then, I hereby welcome you as official genin of Konoha. Naruto let out a few shadow clones for cover as he grunted and took the chakra-powered blow to his thigh before pushing himself away with his good leg. Hinata quickly pursued him as he bounded off, rolling in midair to avoid the attacks of both of his clones before slashing out and hitting them both in the head to dispel them. With Byakugan blazing, she landed smoothly and rolled, using the momentum to launch herself at Naruto. Shit, Naruto thought, then quickly swapped it out for a nearby log, before she turned on a dime and hurried him once more, throwing multiple shuriken to stop the hand signs she knew he was about to start on. He watched as the log was easily demolished by the pale-eyed Kunoichi's blow. After cursing, Naruto quickly created a shadow clone, which prevented Hinata's initial attack by slowing her momentum and enabling him to avoid her vicious Jiyuken strikes once more. Have I gotten so predictable? With a frown tarnishing his features, Naruto pondered. Hinata chose to throw a flurry of kunai at him instead of displaying any emotion in response to his frown. Without thinking, he jumped up, and as soon as the girl jumped into the air with him, her face beaming with victory, he realized his error. With a quick thought, he created a shadow clone and then kicked it away from her, sending it in the direction of the Hyuga. An idea suddenly came to him, and he smiled broadly at the scheme. It might work, but it's so dumb. And I guess I'll have to start acting like a complete stranger or else Hinata-chan will beat me eventually. With his most used hand sign already up, he landed on one knee and formed a small army of shadow clones behind him. In an attempt to hit Hinata in midair, clones were suddenly snatching up other clones and throwing them at the still.in.air. When the clones started flying, Hinata used her superior taijutsu skills to Jiyuken them. However, there were so many that she had to use ordinary taijutsu to dispel them in order to preserve chakra. That one's gone after an axe. Kick to the head. Dispelled. An elbow to the face. She struck another person's stomach with her fist, but instead of dispelling it in a cloud of smoke, it merely gave her a big smile despite the pain before swiftly flipping them so that he was holding her in a headlock. Hinata saw the dust clear and saw about 20 kunai pointing at her neck, including one from the boy who was now embracing her from behind, as they crashed into a group of clones that had gathered below them, cushioning their fall back to earth. She shrugged, letting out a frustrated sigh. I concede. I would be dead right now if you were the enemy. As all of Naruto's clones dispersed, a thick cloud of smoke swept over the two, leaving the smiling boy clutching the now red girl. She wasn't completely happy, but she was a little embarrassed to be so close. He gave a low, OOMF, as she gave him a reverse head butt in the chest. Saying, "You idiot," she took one of his hands and tentatively played with his fingers. She bowed one of his fingers slightly, hearing the blonde hiss in pain. If I had still been using Jiyuken against your clones, I would have seriously hurt you with that blow to the stomach. That was stupid and reckless for a simple spar, Naruto-kun, she said. He tried to pull his hand away, but it was yanked back into her lap with force. Hinata-chan, he said. His explanation was sound, but Hinata wouldn't let him win. He yelled lightly as she bent another finger back, saying, I knew that you would stop using unnecessary chakra to only dispel clones. Seeing as how you needed enough to finish me off and your reserves aren't big enough to be able to do that yet. Stop that. She shouted back, no, before he noticed that his hand was a little wet. Was that the violet-haired beauty stiffened as he whispered, Hinata, look at me. She gripped his hand with her now shaking hands and said, N.No, with a little less rage. Naruto sighed. He never thought she would become so obstinate while he was gone. However, he assumed that stubbornness was one of the best qualities she could have to make things easier for herself when she had to face her cold father head on and be able to stare him down in combat. This is preferable to having a huge ego or superiority complex. His eyes widened as he took in her expression as he swiftly whipped her around. Additionally, her eyes were slightly widened in surprise, which emphasized the tears that were streaming from their corners. As he cradled her in his chest and massaged her back, his breath caught. As he heard her faint sobs rocking her body, he said softly, Hinata-chan, why are you crying? I'm sorry I did that, but I had to find a way to win. She muttered, you don't understand, and screamed into his chest. Still running his hand down her spine, he scowled. Then tell me, he exclaimed, perplexed by her behavior. Why did girls have to be so mysterious? He told Jiraiya Gigi about any issues he had, which weren't many, and they would resolve them. He hardly ever had any confusion about what was happening because everything was so obvious. However, now they had all jumped right into their training, even though it had been a few weeks since they were given their assignments. As part of his interrogation training, Shino was studying human psychology, pressure points, and various political systems in various villages. In the event that the scouting team was successful in apprehending an enemy in hostile territory, they needed to be able to break him there in case they were unable to return to friendly territory in time for a comprehensive interrogation. Upon finishing his training, the boy would become engrossed in anything that could help him understand how shinobi minds responded to a particular circumstance, such as anatomy textbooks, books on the human mind, autobiographies of more experienced shinobi, or reports from missions or wars. The idea of someone who was as eager to break someone's mind as his first and most famous pupil, who had been occupied with making a certain Hyuga's life a living hell, made Ibiki very happy. Even after their training was supposed to be over for the day, Anko had been hunting the young girl non-stop. This created an anxious environment for the violet-haired beauty, who was terrified that she would harm Naruto in these vicious attacks as well as that the crazy snake bitch, as Naruto so eloquently described her, would surprise her one of these times, promising a particularly hard training session the next day. He was asking Jiraiya to train with him, after all, if he wasn't already training with her. If that didn't work out, he would train alone until Hinata had some free time. After that, they would unwind, train, go out to dinner, or do whatever else caught their attention at the moment. Hinata worried about the boy because he was working himself to the bone practically all the time, when she wasn't busy worrying about when Anko might pop out next. Naruto had been surprised during the first few weeks of training with the girl. She fought fiercely now, revealing a completely different side of her to him than he had ever seen in their early academy days, when he remembered her being reserved and unsure of herself in battle. After a good session of head bopping, he thought she looked rather cute when she whined about him gently knocking her on the head with the underside of his fist, and reassuring words that she most definitely would not kill him. She had agreed. Of course, she hadn't come at him with the intent to kill in the first few fights, which he made clear she should do if she wanted to gain some sort of experience from their battles. Since then, Naruto has had to practice avoiding her lethal chakra-filled attacks, gradually learning his fighting style and using an increasing number of his book tricks. The girl in his arms head butted his chest once more, jolting him out of his reverie. She shook her head, more tears streaming from her fragile eyes. If I had chosen to start using Jayuken strikes again. If I had hurt you, she said, wouldn't be able to forgive myself Naruto-kun, I wouldn't. Naruto felt guilt and circled his conscience as something clicked in his mind. His companion gave him a quiet giggle as he pondered, I'm sorry Hinata-chan. It's just you've been putting me on the ropes lately and I figured it was time to try something new. I suppose flinging myself at you like a kunai was just a tad reckless though. She appeared at a loss for words as she asked, just a tad, Naruto-kun. Try a lot of tads? Naruto snorted and burst out laughing. As he carried her, Hinata yelled and landed on his left leg, her hands on either side of her head. Unaware of the scarlet flush that was gradually rising up Hinata's face as she became aware of her situation, Naruto kept laughing. If someone happened to spot her. Think fast stalker girl. Hissing in exasperation that he had missed his target, Hinata moaned before snatching Naruto and jumping away from the 30 foot snake that had slammed into the ground they were just approaching. Naruto quickly became solemn, squinting at her opponent before he grimaced. He stepped in front of Hinata in a protective manner and yelled, "What do you want, you insane snake bitch?" Hinata stepped around him and ignored his disappointed expression, rolling her eyes but blushing nonetheless at his actions. Anko responded with a smile of delight. Surprise attacks are part of training, shorty. She quickly informed her pupil that she had observed the position in which the two runts had been. She nearly burst out laughing at the girl's expression of sheer embarrassment as it rapidly returned to its original shade of red. "If you wanted the day off to relax, you shoulda let me know. I would chipped in for the love hotel," she cried. After scratching his head in perplexity, Naruto shrugged. "Can she have the rest of the day off? We just got done having a particularly nasty spar and..." With an abrupt change in tone, Anko interrupted, asking, "Will the enemy let her rest after they pursue her if she's caught killing her target? I knew you two were duking it out, that's why I decided to attack when the two of you were most vulnerable. You must never let your guard down, especially with the position the two of you have been given. You wouldn't have sensed me if I didn't announce my presence, Hinata, and although your reaction time was splendid when you did know I was there, you would have been dead otherwise. You need to remember that the only time you're considered on safe grounds during my training is when you're sleeping in your bed or in your compound training with your clan, otherwise you're a target." Hinata tilted her head in disbelief on her normally upbeat expression. She was angry with herself for lowering her defenses so readily. She had no justifications, even if she was with Naruto, particularly if she hoped to accompany him on missions in the future. If they both wished to live, they had to be at their best. Anko cut Naruto off as he was about to defend his friend. "And you, Blondie, while I respect your strength, you have nowhere near the amount of experience that I do in the field, and as such you have no right to think that the girl deserves any respite from this training. I chose her personally because I saw her will to work hard and achieve what other people would quit on. I could see that she wouldn't have let you fight her fight anyway, or let you talk me out of it, but I need you to understand so you aren't walking around with a grudge in your heart because I won't let up. I'm doing this so that she doesn't die." She ended her statement with a harsh tone, causing the blonde to glare at her for a moment before tearing his look away. He didn't have to agree with her, but she was correct. He gave Hinata-chan a quick embrace before running off into the woods, saying, "Faye, whatever. Go kick that snake's ass and get me when you're done, Hinata-chan, I'll be eating at Ichiraku's." With a sigh, Hinata turned to her sensei and apologized. "I'm sorry, Anko. Sensei, he's just..." Anko rattled off some of her own adjectives, adding to Hinata's frown and making the older woman sigh as well. "A little fucking dense? Overprotective? An idiot?" she asked. She stretched out on her summon's head and scratched its scaly hide, making it hum with satisfaction. "Listen, I don't mean to belittle the kid. He's got a ton of talent, and a tremendous amount of power. But he needs experience to go along with that power or he's a ticking time bomb. That temper of his doesn't help either, and neither does his condition." With both of them acutely aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki, Hinata nodded solemnly. A kunai whizzed past her, a clear liquid dripping down the blade, and she abruptly whipped her head to the side. As more of the poisoned weapons flew at her, Hinata squinted and used her Byakugan. All right, enough of this talk, time to defend yourself." With a violent finish, Naruto smashed his fourth bowl of ramen onto the table, shattering it in his hands. When Tucci heard the noise, she hurried outside and appeared startled by the shattered dish. He asked, more worried about the boy's health than about one of his special extra large ramen bowls, "Naruto-kun, are you alright? Did you cut your hands at all?" Naruto gave a remorseful nod. "I'm fine, it was my fault, I wasn't being careful. I'll pay for a new bowl for you, Tucci-san." Knowing that the boy would, the ramen vendor nodded. The man crossed his arms as he tried to find a way to express his feelings. "Whenever you have the money, Naruto-kun. But tell me, what has caused you so much stress, my boy? You were eating my ramen with a passion today, and not your usual one. This one was, how should I say, darker. As a ramen master I simply cannot remain idle while my favorite customer is eating with a dark aura." Naruto grinned subtly, moved that the man could sense when something was wrong because he was so sensitive to his emotions. "It's nothing serious, Tucci-san, I'm just worried." "About what, Naruto-kun?" Naruto paused. "Hinata-chan." Tucci gave a nod. Naruto had frequently brought the Hyuga heiress to eat at his stand, and everyone was aware of her, and her crush on the boy. Despite her quiet demeanor, he had detected a fiery aspect within her, concealed beneath her kind exterior. Given his own passionate perspective, he could understand why the boy was so attached to her. "What about her, Naruto-kun? Is everything well with her?" Naruto began, his brows furrowing. Well, yeah. He shook his head, unable to come up with good words to describe the woman in question. But her sensei is very, he said. Tucci understood and nodded. So she's in danger from her training? Naruto gave a headshake. No, I just don't want her pushing herself too hard, you know? Tucci snorted and then laughed briefly, causing Naruto's eyebrows to furrow. What's so funny? Naruto, my boy, how often do you train? Taken aback by the inquiry, Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, something like 12.16 hours a day. And of that time, how many times are you almost at 0 chakra left? Or even, how many times do you get hurt while training, to the point where most people would stop? Naruto proudly puffed out his chest. He pounded his chest with his hand and exclaimed, I go longer and harder than most people. That's why I'll be the strongest one day, just you wait Tucci-san. Tucci gave a headshake. That's exactly the point I'm getting to. A little bewildered, Naruto cocked his head. You're pushing yourself very hard, giving yourself very little breaks to improve yourself as fast as possible, right? He patiently asked. A faint arose on Naruto's face after he nodded. He bowed his head, embarrassed by his previous behavior. Enko had just informed him that she was acting in Hinata's best interests. To keep her safe while on missions. Tucci nodded, pleased that the boy's response had indicated that he understood the similarities between the two circumstances. Good, you understand. Now, if it's worrying you this much, why don't you go on a mission to get your mind off of things? Naruto nodded, remembering what Enko had said about needing more experience. Before going inside the ramen stand, he called out, that's a good idea, old man. Thanks for the advice, and the ramen, I'll pay you back soon. His face went blank as soon as it was in the public eye. A few villagers were staring at it after hearing his voice from inside the stand, but they quickly turned their heads when they saw him. Naruto sighed inside. They feared him. It wasn't his ultimate objective, but it was better than the vile looks he was accustomed to. This was the expression he wore ever since he returned, unless he was with the few people he knew he could trust to a certain degree. Hinata, Tucci, Jiraiya, the Hokage, and even Enko after their initial encounters. This was to be his front when he was on missions. Mechanical, emotionless, and frigid. An ideal shinobi. Strangely enough, he was the complete opposite of the mask he was wearing now. Even though he didn't trust many people, he was genuinely kind and considerate to those who had shown him friendship and concern. Anyone else, particularly these naive peasants. He made his way toward the Hokage Tower, walking steadily down the main street. Desperate not to call forth the demon's wrath, many people in the streets avoided him, even avoiding eye contact. As he watched, a ball rolled toward his foot from the crowd. Thinking it might have been a flash bomb or spike, he stiffened and raised his arm to shield his face, but nothing came of it. It was an ordinary ball. When she saw the boy picking it up, a little girl froze and ran out of the crowd. Evidently thinking that she would never get it back now that this strange boy had it, Naruto watched as a few fat tears trickled down her cheeks. As he approached her slowly, he saw her freeze in terror and search for her mother, who was not there. She recoiled as he knelt down. Is this your ball? She gave him a wide-eyed stare before hastily nodding. As he gave it to her, he gave her a small, comforting smile rather than a big, foxy one. Be careful, if you lose this again it might get stepped on and popped, and then you wouldn't have this anymore, alright? She blinked and then nodded, smiling broadly as she returned the toy to him. Thank you, He patted her head and said, Naruto. She exclaimed, Nato, with a broad smile. Naruto smiled a little more broadly. How adorable this little G.I. Gee. Get away from my daughter. As soon as he straightened up and met the woman's glaring eyes, his mask came back into place. Despite her slight reluctance, she held her ground and extended her arms. She spoke shakily, never taking her eyes off the blonde, who simply gave her a passive stare in return. See. Come on, sweetie. Circa come back to mommy, she said. After giving her mother a strange look, the young girl turned around and gave Naruto's leg a hug. In a split second, he saw the woman's expression change from one of worry to one of horror. Thank you, Nato, exclaimed the girl with joy. She joyfully skipped back to her mother, who snatched her up and held her close, seemingly expecting the child to vanish at any second. I have to go to my mommy now, bye, she exclaimed. Mommy, Nato found my ball and gave it back to me, she exclaimed joyfully, eagerly displaying the ball to her mother as proof. The woman ignored her, instead glaring at the blonde genin with all the bravery she possessed. With tears in her eyes, she concluded, Street, stay away from her. You can't have her. Shish. She's all I have left of Tomo. As pity overcame Naruto, His mask cracked slightly. She genuinely thought he was the Kyuubi, just like everyone else in this fucking town. She only wanted to protect her daughter, so it wasn't necessarily her fault. Her husband must have been a shinobi who was recently killed, and she was afraid of losing the rest of her family. He stepped forward. "Listen, miss, I'm not." She stepped back and yelled, "Don't come near her. You fucking demons, stay away from my little girl." Naruto became enraged. "Look, if you would just listen to me." Desperate to get out, she screamed, "And your lies? So you can corrupt me, and take my daughter away? You're vile, go to hell where you belong." Naruto was now furious. Why wouldn't they simply pay attention? They would realize he wasn't a villain if they would just listen to him. He did not want to harm them. He wanted to protect them. He became a shinobi in order to defend both himself and the people he cared about. And his beloved people would also be these foolish fools if they would only realize that he wasn't the nine-tailed fox in human form. His eyes glowed red as his rage flared, and he saw the terrified looks on the faces of some of the villagers, who believed he was going to murder them all. This is it, he's finally showing his true form. Oh god, not again, we just finished rebuilding. Someone get the Anbu, that thing is about to go on a rampage. In an attempt to shake his head violently and drive the voices out of his mind, Naruto's sensitive hearing picked up every word and sent every hateful message straight into his consciousness. "Stop talking. I do not wish to cause harm to any of you. I wish to keep you safe. I wish you all a long and happy life. I hope you're content. All I want is happiness. Quit. Shut you ppp," he bellowed, the Kyuubi's influence creeping into his voice and giving it a deep bass. The street became quiet and still, with everyone staring at the little boy who was panting and waiting for him to lose it at any second. They all turned their heads in fear as he abruptly disappeared, making sure he wasn't going to scuttle through them from behind. They all hurried on their way after the tense moment ended, clearly put off by their run-in with the Jinchuriki. Some began heading to the Hokage Tower with the intention of complaining that the boy was going to go crazy and begin killing people right away. With a distressed little mind, the young girl who had retrieved her toy gazed at the location where the blonde boy had vanished. When she pulled on her mother's sleeve to get her attention, the woman grinned broadly and looked down at her. "Yes, sweetie. Mommy. Why is Nato so sad?" The woman pursed her lips. "He isn't sad, honey. He's a very dangerous man who wants to hurt you. You need to promise Mommy you'll stay away from him, okay?" The young girl gave her mother a perplexed look. Then why was he crying, Mommy? After giving her a blank look, the woman picked up her daughter and began walking home. To that, she had no response. Red-faced, Naruto staggered into the Hokage's office, gripping the wall to try to collect himself. As Naruto's eyes practically glowed red, bloody tears dripping from them, and his hands curled into tight fists that leaked his red life essence from where his now sharpened nails had punctured his palms, Sarutobi jumped at the sudden intrusion into his office, looking worried. Though he remained silent, the older man approached Naruto and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Naruto inhaled deeply, his body pulsing with the consolation his surrogate grandfather had given him. His nails withdrew from inside his hand's skin, and his eyes gradually returned to normal. "Naruto, what happened?" Sarutobi inquired after the boy appeared to be sufficiently composed. Before he spoke, Naruto wiped the scarlet tears from his face and inhaled deeply through his nose. "Villagers," he said plainly, his gaze on the elderly Hokage saying more than any words Naruto could have conjured. With a sigh, the leader drew the boy into a loving embrace, which the boy gladly returned. For a while, they remained in that state, Sarutobi reflecting on Minato's final wish and Naruto contemplating what he needed to do to reach the naive villagers. Apparently able to read Naruto's mind, Sarutobi said, "I'm sorry, Naruto." He smiled when Naruto laughed at his use of the term, "old codger." All of these people are still blinded by hate. Although 12 years seems like a long time to you, to an old codger like me it's but a small part of our long histories. Naruto nodded, his little smile turning to a frown. With a dejected expression on his face, he concluded, "I don't know what I have to do to get them to see that I'm not it. I don't know if I'll ever get through to them." Sarutobi gave a nod, reflecting the same thought. "My boy, it would take a miracle to make them realize how foolish their actions are. Or your dad talking to them himself. I'm so sorry." Naruto pushed the elderly man away from his regretful thoughts with the words, "Hey, Gigi." With an almost imploring tone, he inquired, "Are there any teams going out on missions soon? Like, out of the village? Or any solo missions I can do?" Sarutobi grinned and then reached for a file on his desk. "As a matter of fact, I do Naruto-kun. Team 10 has just received a mission to guard a small trading caravan on its way to the south side of Fire Country. Let's see." he said as he examined the file more closely. Low. C rank, guarding 2 wagons with a total of 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. Expected time for completion should be 4 days to travel to their destination, and a day and a half back once they're dropped off. An extra day or 2 can be taken, however, so the mission should take about a week. He finished by placing his pipe in his mouth and lighting it up. The Hokage didn't acknowledge Naruto's raised eyebrow when he said, "If you would like to assist on this mission, go find Team 10's sensei, Asuma Sarutobi. Tell him that I've given you my permission and recommendation to go along on this mission as single support. If he gives the okay, you are to meet with him and his team tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. sharp, packed for a week. Long mission. Do you understand?" he asked, looking over his pipe at Naruto. The old man grinned as the blonde gave an enthusiastic nod. He laughed, clearly amused by the idea, and said, "Wonderful. In that case, go find my son. He should be at the barbecue place by the Akamichi compound, I would expect. One of his pupils always ropes him into paying for his meals." Grinning at the elderly Hokage in front of him, Naruto nodded. After saying, "Thank you Gigi, this means a lot to me," he bounded out of the room. Sarutobi laughed to himself once more before his expression turned grave. "Salamander, you have something to report?" In one of the room's corners, an Anbu mask appeared to be leaking out of the shadows. "Hokage. Sama, it appears that he is on the move again. We're not sure if he's targeting the Uzumaki boy or the Uchiha, but his agents are moving, and fast." Sarutobi gave a nod. "Keep tails on both of them, and make sure they are not seen. I cannot express the importance of this. We could lose the trust of either of them if they detect that they're being followed, and even if we were to explain they might not understand. Keep extra care of Naruto, his skills are advancing quickly. Just make sure that the enemy agents do not interfere with them at all," he said as he sat down. "Sir." The Anbu muttered as he bent his head and bled back into the darkness. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair and sighed. He was becoming too old to do this anymore. The next morning, with a sigh, Naruto created multiple shadow clones using slightly more chakra than normal to ensure they would last longer than a few hours. To the bewilderment of his fellow doppelgangers, he ordered some to continue studying different jutsu theories and others to maintain his run down apartment as clean as possible. However, he pulled aside the final one. Clearly thrilled to be singled out from the others, the clone whispered, "What's up, boss?" As they left the apartment, Naruto whispered back, "Shish, I'm giving you a mission the others would kill to have. You, in particular." The clone excitedly whispered back, "Wah. Cool, I must be a badass." Which caused Naruto to perspire. Whatever helped his clone sleep at night, he had actually just picked one at random. Was it asleep? Hold on, did they need to eat? This was no time for such thoughts, he said, shaking his head. He looked around frantically and whispered, "You need to go and find Hinata-chan and tell her about the mission and when I'll be back." The clone's face was filled with shock before it excitedly pumped its fist. "Fuck yeah, that's the best. MMPHPHMHP. It evidently failed in its attempt to communicate through Naruto's hand." Naruto muttered ominously, "Shut the fuck up," as he watched to see if any other clones would emerge to vie for his position. When none did, he released his grip and looked at the copy, which was embarrassed and scratching its head. Before jumping off into the sunrise to find the princess, it said, "Sorry boss, just got a little excited. I'll make sure she knows, don't worry." With a sigh, Naruto moved in the direction of the gates. He was reluctant to part from her, but he was in dire need of some time away from the villagers. Hinata's insane sensei, too. He almost removed his mask to groan as he approached the gates and saw the members of Team 10. This mission is going to be lengthy.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.